The world was once bright. Sera, a planet not unlike Earth, had been a cradle of civilization, of ambition, and of devastating contradiction. Its people had built cities that scraped the sky, crafted machines that harvested the winds, and touched the edges of science like a god reaching toward creation. But as with all things born of pride and progress, it was only a matter of time before the balance broke. The first fracture came not from above, but from deep below. Emulsion, a golden liquid pulsing with energy, discovered beneath the crust of Sera in the early days of the Pendulum Wars. At first, it was a miracle, an answer to energy crises, a currency of power. But emulsion was more than fuel. It was alive, and it was waiting. Two great powers, the coalition of ordered governments and the union of independent republics, warred for nearly 8 decades over who would control it. Trillions of bullets, millions of lives, and countless cities reduced to dust, all for the promise of endless power. Among the soldiers bred by this ceaseless war was Marcus Fenix. Born to the legendary war hero Adam Fenix, Marcus was forged in fire. He was young when he took up arms for the COG, fearless, brilliant in battle, but always haunted by something more than duty. War had stolen his peace and left only purpose. But even the Pendulum Wars, as brutal as they were, would pale before what came next. Emergence Day. It began with a tremor, then a roar, then a scream from the earth itself. On a day that should have passed like any other, the ground erupted and nightmares poured out. The Locust Horde, a subterranean race of terrifying humanoid beasts, emerged with brutal precision. Entire cities were swallowed in hours. Millions perished. Humanity, already fractured by war, now faced extinction. Marcus fought on the front lines, chainsaw bayonet in hand, as his comrades fell beside him. He watched the COG crumble under the weight of an enemy that knew their weaknesses, anticipated their moves, and slaughtered without mercy. In the midst of the chaos, Marcus made a fateful choice. When he disobeyed orders to try and save his father, he was court-martialed and imprisoned. For 4 years he sat behind bars, while the world continued to burn. But the war did not forget him. When the Locust assault reached the prison gates, the COG had no choice. They needed him. Dominic Santiago, his best friend and brother-in-arms, came for him. With chains rattling and weapons drawn, Marcus was freed not to seek redemption, but because there were few warriors left who could still turn the tide. Together, they joined Delta Squad, a team forged in desperation. Coltrane, the exuberant ex-Thrasher Ball star, Baird, the sardonic gearhead with a razor-sharp mind, and Dom, ever loyal, ever grieving. His wife Maria had vanished during the chaos, and every battle brought him closer to finding her, or to losing himself. They fought through the ruins of humanity's legacy, across shattered cities and overgrown jungles, through collapsed fortresses and deadened laboratories. At the heart of it all was the Locust Queen Mira, a voice of order in the chaos, regal, cruel, and intelligent. The Locust were not mindless monsters. They were a civilization, one that had survived beneath Sera for centuries, and one that now fought to claim the surface as their own. But the Locust were not alone in the dark. Beneath them stirred a deeper terror, the Ambient, twisted by exposure to raw emulsion. These creatures were unstable, volatile, and driven by a madness that made them enemies to both human and Locust alike. The war evolved. No longer just humanity versus the Locust. Now it was a three-sided war, one where survival meant outmaneuvering a world unraveling from within. And through it all, Marcus endured, leading, fighting, bleeding, and wondering if there was ever truly an end to it all. This was not just a war for land or power. It was a war for the right to exist. Hope was a fragile thing on Sera, and with each passing day, it cracked a little more. Delta Squad pressed deeper into the ruins of civilization, chasing leads, searching for answers, and carrying the unbearable weight of humanity's last stand. There were victories, yes, strikes against the Locust that felt like turning points. But the enemy always adapted, always returned, stronger and more desperate than before. Beneath the surface, the Locust waged their own secret war. The lambent infection spread like wildfire, corrupting their tunnels, twisting their kin. The queen, once confident in her dominion, now saw her empire teetering on the brink of annihilation. Annihilation. Her only hope was to flood the hollow, to sacrifice countless locusts in order to destroy the lambent. It was a monstrous solution, but one she was willing to enact. And so, she sent Scourge, the high priest of the Locust, a brutal, towering beast wielding a twin-bladed chainsaw staff. His presence marked the Locust's fury made flesh. Every clash with Scourge tested Marcus and his squad in ways no human enemy ever had. It was as if the Locusts themselves were evolving with each battle, mimicking the rage and relentlessness of the humans they fought. Dom grew quieter with each mission. The search for Maria had become his obsession, a flickering candle in the endless dark. When they finally found her, imprisoned and barely alive in a Locust labor camp, it was too late. The woman he loved was gone, her body hollowed by torment and despair. Dom held her one last time, pressed the barrel to her temple, and freed her with a trembling hand. Marcus didn't speak. None of them did. There were no words for that kind of pain, just the unspoken bond of soldiers who had lost too much already. And still they marched forward. As the COG collapsed from within, Chairman Prescott abandoned the sinking ship of state. But not before revealing a secret even Marcus had not expected. His father, Adam Fenix, was alive, hidden away on Azura, an island fortress cloaked by science, protected from the chaos tearing the world apart. The revelation hit Marcus like a hammer. His father, the very reason he'd been imprisoned, the ghost behind every decision he'd ever made, was not a ghost at all. They had to reach Azura, but the Locusts were everywhere, and the lambent now surged from the earth like vengeful flame. Whole cities became battlefields of fire and ash. Delta Squad fought tooth and nail, bleeding every step, losing comrades, sacrificing whatever was left of their humanity. The Hammer of Dawn, long considered a relic of a more brutal era, was brought back into play. Solar-powered orbital weapons that could incinerate entire regions. It was scorched earth diplomacy, and it worked. When they finally reached Azura, the truth unfurled like a storm. Adam Fenix had been working on a solution, a device that could neutralize emulsion, cleansing the planet of both the lambent and the Locust. But it came with a price. The weapon would not distinguish between enemies. It would eradicate any being touched by emulsion. That included the Locust, and possibly more. The Queen, defiant to the end, faced Marcus in a final confrontation that was both brutal and tragic. Mira saw herself as a mother to her people, and in her eyes, humanity were the true monsters. But Marcus had no room left for philosophy. He ended it with a blade, his father's legacy pulsing in the air around him. Adam Fenix activated the device, unleashing a wave of energy across the world. The lambent burst apart, the Locust turned to ash. But Adam, exposed too long to the energy, collapsed in front of his son. With his final breath, he apologized for everything. For the war, for the lies, for not being there. Marcus held his father as the world finally grew quiet. The war was over, and for the first time in a generation, there was silence on Sera. But silence does not always mean peace. The war was over, but the world had changed. The surface of Sera bore the scars of annihilation. Cities collapsed into silence, roads overtaken by ash, oceans still carrying the echoes of screams. Delta Squad, now fewer in number and heavier in spirit, had no purpose left but to survive. For a brief time, there was a fragile peace. Humanity emerged from the shadows, blinking in the newborn light of an uncertain future. The coalition of ordered governments was fractured, but not broken. Stroud and her remaining forces tried to rebuild something resembling order, while Marcus retreated from the world, his soul hollowed by the weight of sacrifice. Years passed. A new generation rose from the ruins. They never knew the worst of the Locust War, but they carried its blood in their veins. Among them was J.D. Fenix, Marcus's son, a soldier like his father, though shaped by a different world. J.D. believed in something more hopeful, something beyond the endless cycle of destruction. But like his father, he would be forced to face truths buried deep beneath the soil of Sera. For beneath that soil, the Locust were not dead. They had not been obliterated by Adam Phoenix's weapon. They had changed, evolved. Buried for years, they were cocooned in stone-like shells, transformed by emulsion's final act into something new, something terrifying. The swarm was born, and the silence was shattered once more. J.D., alongside his friends Del Walker and Kate Diaz, first encountered the swarm during a routine mission turned nightmare. Villages vanished. Entire outposts were swallowed by monstrous new creatures. Hulking drones, writhing snatchers, and massive beasts unlike anything seen before. Kate's world was torn apart when her mother, Raina, was abducted and assimilated into the swarm hive. In the rescue attempt, they discovered something even more harrowing. The queen of the swarm bore Kate's blood. Raina had been transformed, and her lineage tied back to Mira herself. The Locust Queen had not perished in spirit. Her genetic legacy lived on in Kate. Marcus, pulled back into the fray by necessity, guided his son through the fire. The years had weathered him, hardened him, but his instincts remained sharp. He knew this war was different, more personal, more insidious. As the swarm gained strength, the COG faltered again. Technology grew faster than diplomacy. Armored constructs called DBs replaced most human soldiers, automated tools of war patrolling cities in uneasy silence. While they provided security, they were also symbols of the COG's tightening grip, and many viewed them with suspicion. JD himself had once served among them, but after an incident that left civilians dead, he defected and vanished into the wilds with Del. It was Kate who became the heart of the new resistance. Haunted by dreams not her own, by visions of the swarm's hive and the queen who stirred within it, she feared what she might become. Was her destiny to lead humanity's salvation or its extinction? Driven by the need for answers, she ventured into the ruins of the old world. With Del at her side, she followed the whispers of her bloodline, unraveling the buried secrets of the Locust's origin. It was there, in the ancient research labs of Mount Catter, that she found the truth. The Locust had not been monsters born of nature. They were a failed experiment, the result of genetic manipulation by Dr. Niall Sampson and others, who had sought to create a race immune to emulsion sickness. Instead, they had birthed a plague, and Mira, Kate's grandmother, had been their first queen. Now, Kate stood at a crossroads. She could feel the call of the hive, a siren song pulling at her mind. The more she resisted, the stronger it became. And yet, her resolve did not falter. She would carve her own path, no longer defined by blood or prophecy. The war reignited. The swarm struck at the heart of COG territories, and the people of Sera were thrust once again into survival mode. The battlefield stretched across tundra and desert, through storm-scarred cities and long-abandoned strongholds. JD returned, scarred and chastened by his past. Though rift from Kate and Dell, he threw himself into the fight. Marcus watched his son and saw the same stubborn fire he once carried, the same burdened shoulders. Then came the Kraken, a monstrous leviathan, the swarm's deadliest weapon yet. It descended on settlements with mindless fury, consuming everything in its path. The only hope lay in ancient hammer of dawn satellites, long dormant, their power forgotten. Reactivating them became the squad's mission. But in doing so, they had to face the legacy of old wars and the men who built their world with fire. In the heat of battle, Kate faced Reyna once more. No longer mother, no longer human. Now she was queen in full, and she gave Kate a choice. Rejoin her lineage, embrace what she was, or perish with the rest of humanity. Kate chose defiance. She severed the swarm's psychic link, but the cost was severe. Dell or JD, one of them fell in that moment, depending on the path fate chose. The burden of choice weighed heavier than any weapon. And still, the war raged on. The Locust were never truly gone. They had only evolved. And as Sera's skies darkened once more, the people below knew there would be no peace without blood. Not until the queen herself was silenced. The ruins of Ephra smoldered beneath skies veined with fire, and the world reeled from the queen's fury. Kate stood in silence amid the ash, her armor cracked and scorched, her breath ragged. Around her lay the fragments of war, burned out wreckage, shattered DBs, and fallen comrades whose names she would never forget. She looked to the horizon, where the last of the hammer of dawn satellites flickered uncertainly through the smoky heavens. They had won a battle, but it was no victory. Far to the south, deep beneath the surface of Sera, something stirred. The swarm had not died with Reyna. They had only fractured. In the darkness of a lost hive, a new mind began to awaken, ancient and cruel, a remnant of something older than even the Locust. The psychic web that had once been tethered to Reyna now twisted and reformed, reaching out across the tunnels, gathering strength. In New Ephra, COG leadership regrouped. President Jin, hardened by loss but unwilling to yield, ordered a global counteroffensive. The remaining cities became fortresses. The world was in open war. Marcus Fenix, older now but no less formidable, returned to the field, guiding a new generation of gears. His legacy had become the blueprint of resistance, but the cost had never been higher. Kate, carrying the scars of her bloodline and the memory of Reyna's final words, led her own strike team. Beside her stood Cole's daughter Hannah, a tactical genius and demolitions expert, and Garen Paduk, the grizzled veteran of 1,000 battles. Dell's or JD's absence haunted them all, a silence in their ranks that no battle cry could cover. Together, they hunted the source of the swarm's resurgence. Clues led them to forgotten research bases, hidden sanctuaries from the early Pendulum Wars, and long-abandoned Locust tunnels beneath Vex Island. In these depths, they uncovered the truth. The swarm had discovered a way to seed new hives through corrupted human hosts, twisting the living into gestation chambers. It was no longer just a war for territory, it was a war for the future of the human race. The team encountered remnants of the UIR, survivors who had hidden in isolation and now fought a desperate guerrilla war of their own. An uneasy alliance was formed, information traded, secrets uncovered. The ancient being stirring beneath the earth had a name once spoken only in Locust legend, the Harbinger. A psychic entity that once whispered to Mira in dreams, now returning to reshape the world in its own image. Back in New Ephra, political fractures widened. Civil unrest grew as people questioned the COG's dominance, its secrets, and its failures. Resistance cells not allied with Kate's group began launching strikes of their own, some even attempting to bargain with the swarm. Desperation birthed dangerous ideologies. The Harbinger's influence reached into minds through dreams, corrupting soldiers, leaders, and citizens alike. Paranoia spread. Friends turned on each other. Kate found herself in a war on two fronts, one of flesh and fire, the other of thought and will. To fight back, the Gears developed neural inhibitors and psychic dampeners, crude devices with brutal side effects. But it wasn't enough. The only true defense lay in the blood of those who had heard the song and lived. Kate was key. Her connection was no longer a curse, it was a weapon. Their mission led them to the shattered remains of Azura, once the secret COG stronghold, now a graveyard in the sea. Beneath its foundations, they uncovered forbidden archives. There they learned of a machine called the Cradle, a device once intended to rewrite consciousness, developed to control the Locust Queen but abandoned as too dangerous. Now it might be their only chance to sever the Swarm's new link before the Harbinger rose fully. The journey to rebuild the Cradle would take them across continents, through fallen cities and sunken ruins, pursued by monstrous creations born of both swarm and machine. The line between man and monster blurred as Sera spiraled further into chaos. And at the heart of it all stood Kate, the only one who could walk the line between two worlds and not lose herself. The war for Sera was no longer about survival. It was about evolution, and the outcome would decide whether humanity ascended or vanished forever. The storm over Sera had become more than a physical phenomenon. It was psychic, symbolic, a roiling surge of change battering against the old world. Kate stood atop the broken cliffs of Vasker, her eyes fixed on the distant shimmer of a buried city, Telyun, swallowed by time and tectonics. It was the next piece in the puzzle, a ruin of a civilization older than the COG, perhaps older than humanity itself. The Harbinger's voice pulsed stronger here, in dreams and whispers, and Kate could feel it waiting. Her team descended into Telyun's buried corridors. The ancient architecture spoke of knowledge beyond understanding, a fusion between mind and machine. In the heart of the city, they uncovered what the Locust once called the Throne of Echoes, a crystalline construct that amplified thought, built by unknown hands. And upon it, an inscription: "The mind that rules must never sleep." It was a warning, or perhaps a command. Hannah Cole traced the symbols, decoding fragments. The throne had been designed to house consciousness, to preserve thought eternally. Could be the prototype for the cradle. But the danger was immense. If the Harbinger reached it first, it could fuse itself into the fabric of Sera, become an immortal god within the world's psyche. In the tunnels surrounding Telyun, hybrid swarm machines emerged, creatures laced with circuitry and bone, driven by distant will. The Harbinger was learning, adapting, using remnants of DB technology and hijacked AI cores to birth a new breed of servant, the Hollowbound, sentient, strategic, relentless. Kate's squad barely escaped with their lives, retrieving a fragment of the throne's core, a necessary component for reconstructing the cradle. But the journey cost them. Garen Paduk was wounded, infected by a psychic parasite that leached into his thoughts. As they fled across the Vasker desert, Paduk began to dream in the Harbinger's voice. They returned to New Ephra to find it fractured. A terrorist cell known as the Shroud had attacked a command outpost, exposing secrets Jinn had hidden, classified projects that blurred ethical lines. Neural mapping, human experimentation, attempts to graft swarm DNA to human hosts. Public confidence in the COG was crumbling. Marcus Fenix confronted Jinn, demanding transparency, but the president had doubled down. Martial law was declared, curfews imposed. The city bristled with tension. Civil war loomed. Kate, disgusted by the COG's duplicity, made a choice. Her team went rogue. With a few loyal soldiers and defectors from the Shroud, they formed an independent cell. the Breakers. Their mission was no longer sanctioned. It was essential. As Paduk's condition worsened, they sought help from an old enemy, Niles Sampson's surviving AI fragment, buried beneath Mount Catter. In exchange for freedom, Niles revealed a dark truth. The Harbinger was not alien. It was a byproduct of early Sire experiments, an emergent mind born of thousands of broken thoughts, a psychic ghost created by the COG itself. The realization shattered everything. The war was not against something outside humanity. It was against the sins of their own past. Guided by Niles, they reconstructed the cradle beneath the ruins of Anvil Gate. It required a living host, one whose mind could anchor the machine without succumbing. Kate volunteered, but as she prepared for insertion, the Harbinger struck. Hollow-bound forces assaulted Anvil Gate in waves, led by a creature bearing Dell's face twisted by swarm corruption. The battle was apocalyptic. Marcus held the outer wall. Hannah detonated the access tunnels. And in the core chamber, Kate entered the cradle. Pain seared her thoughts as the machine fused to her mind. She descended into the Harbinger's consciousness, a world of memory and madness. There, in a realm built of forgotten screams and fractured logic, she faced the entity. It wore no true form. It was rage, grief, ambition. All of humanity's darkest echoes made whole. They clashed not with weapons, but with memory. Kate wielded her lineage, her love, her loss like a blade, cutting through the fog of illusion. At the edge of annihilation, she did not destroy the Harbinger. She caged it, trapped it within the cradle, bound by the will of a mind unbroken, her own. When she awoke, Anvil Gate was dust. Many had died. Paduk's body lay still, but his mind was at peace. Marcus, wounded but alive, met her with silent pride. The swarm was broken, its queen gone, its god imprisoned. But the world would never be the same. The COG fractured. The Breakers became a symbol of resistance and rebirth. Cities began to rebuild, not as colonies of control, but as alliances of survival. Kate stood atop the ruins of the cradle, watching dawn break through the smog. Sera was quiet for now. The war had changed her, but in her silence, in her strength, she had changed the war. And far below, in circuits buried beneath stone and steel, the Harbinger dreamed anew. The wind carried ash across the highlands of Vex, where the last great fleet of the COG once docked in harbors long since abandoned. Amid rusted hulls and dry-docked warships, the Breakers scouted for survivors. Engineers, scientists, refugees. Anyone who could help stabilize a world adrift in the vacuum left by war. Kate walked alone through the shattered remains of a Pendulum Wars-era carrier, its halls echoing with ghosts and grit. The past was everywhere now, refusing to stay buried. The Harbinger's psychic presence had diminished, sealed beneath the wreckage of Anvil Gate. But whispers still stirred at night, and some swore they heard the scratching of claws. Beneath their feet, the Locust may have been beaten, but not broken. In the dark corners of the hollow, something was gathering strength. JD Fenix and Dell scouted the outer perimeter of the newly reclaimed stronghold. They had taken over what once was a UIR listening post, converting it into a forward operations base. From there, they coordinated recovery efforts and watched for signs of resurgence. They knew it was only a matter of time before the silence gave way to screams. Baird, now leading a contingent of engineers and AI technicians, focused on resurrecting the Hammer of Dawn network. Its satellites had gone dark during the initial swarm incursions, but the blueprints were still there, buried in databases that only Baird knew how to decrypt. He worked obsessively, often forgetting to sleep or eat, driven by a single thought. Next time, humanity had to be ready. Meanwhile, Marcus remained in the field, roaming from outpost to outpost, a grim sentinel. His face, more scar than flesh, had become a symbol to the survivors, a man who had given everything and somehow endured. He said little, but his presence brought calm to the frightened and strength to the weary. Far to the south, in the cavernous remnants of Mount Catter, a new threat stirred. Beneath layers of molten rock and buried laboratories, the remnants of Queen Mira's genetic legacy had fused with forbidden technologies. The swarm's evolution was accelerating. Where once there had been simple, instinct-driven beasts, now emerged tacticians, sentients, wielding psionic power and rudimentary command structures. The matriarchs were returning, birthed from cloning vats powered by geothermal energy. Reyna, once resurrected and repurposed, now led the hive anew, her consciousness fractured between maternal instinct and war-born fury. She remembered Kate. She remembered the connection, but her mind was no longer her own. The swarm spoke through her, around her, above her. She was a vessel. Back at Vex, a council of survivors debated the future. The COG as it had been was no more. In its place, something else had to rise. An alliance of city-states, an oath not to rebuild old empires, but to protect life wherever it took root. A coalition forged not in politics, but in shared scars. As Kate looked out over the horizon, her thoughts turned to the past, to her grandmother's journals, to the history hidden beneath centuries of cover-ups and lies. The war had never truly ended. It had only changed shape. The Locust, the Ambient, the Swarm, names changed, monsters adapted. But so did they. And as the storm clouds gathered once more on the horizon, the gears of war began to turn again. Snow fell like sifted ash over the ruins of Ephra. The city's skeleton, once a bastion of COG power, now stood in grim silence, its towers gutted and streets overgrown. In the heart of this quiet graveyard, a new team of scouts moved through the wreckage, searching for old tech and even older secrets. Among them walked Hannah Cole, daughter of the coal train, her breath misting in the cold air as she traced symbols burned into the steel. A forgotten dialect of the Locust, half code, half prayer. They weren't alone. Deep beneath Ephra's crust, in laboratories shielded by time and stone, ancient COG experiments stirred back to life. The sires, failed precursors to the Locust, had begun to reawaken. Preserved in cryogenic chambers and long thought extinct, they now twitched and howled in half-conscious rage. Hannah's team breached the facility unaware of what lay within, activating dormant systems as they explored. Sirens flared, containment protocols disengaged, glass shattered. Elsewhere, Kate and JD had returned to New Ephra, summoned by a distress call from Baird. The Hammer of Dawn was almost online. A new satellite had achieved low orbit stabilization, the first successful deployment in over a decade. But something was wrong. Readings from the Hollow showed seismic shifts, artificial in pattern, as if something was digging upward, not tectonic, but intentional. Marcus stood over the old city map with Colonel Hoffman, now wheelchair-bound but sharp as ever. They compared swarm movement patterns, realizing too late that Ephra was the target. Not New Ephra, but Old Ephra, where secrets were buried in cement and silence. Beneath the ruins, Hannah's squad fought for survival. One by one, the sires overpowered the scouts, dragging them into darkness. Hannah, bloodied and cornered, triggered a seismic charge and sealed a bulkhead behind her, cutting herself off from the others to keep the monstrosities contained. Her final transmission was a scream and static. Back on the surface, Kate read the transcript in stunned silence. Something had been awakened, something older than the Locust. Mira had been a result, not the cause. The experiments under Ephra were the origin. The sires weren't failed soldiers. They were the blueprint. Reyna, somewhere far below the soil, felt the pulse of it. A new consciousness had entered the swarm. Not hers, not the matriarch's. Something more primal, something hungry. In response, the swarm began to evolve again. New forms emerged from the cocoons. Armored variants, telekinetic bursts, coordinated strategy. No longer a hive reacting, but a force anticipating. They laid siege to old Ephra before dawn, collapsing tunnels and rising through the foundations in a cascade of flesh and fire. Kate led the counterattack. She and Del dropped from Raven gunships with lancers blazing, fighting street by street through the haunted city. They reached the surface entrance to the lab where Hannah's signal had last pinged, but all they found was a blood trail and claw marks gouged into the walls. As night fell, the city became a war zone once more. But this time, the enemy wasn't just brutal. It was smart, and it was learning. The wind howled across the charred skeleton of old Ephra as smoke and snow curled into the sky like morning veils. Kate crouched behind the blackened husk of a toppled APC, her lancer resting against her knee, eyes fixed on the flickering silhouettes moving through the haze. Swarm, no, not just swarm. These new ones moved with disturbing fluidity, their limbs shaped by intention rather than mutation. Armor grown in segmented layers like an insect's carapace, and eyes aglow with intelligence. Del knelt beside her, whispering into his calm commands blind. Jammers across the zone. They knew we were coming. They always know, Kate muttered, voice low. They're adapting. The street erupted with fire as a Ravager-class drone burst from the rubble, flinging a phosphorus charge that ignited the snow into dancing flame. Kate and Del rolled aside, unleashing suppressive fire. Behind them, squads of gears poured from alleys, their boots crunching over bone and steel. Inside the remnants of the old research facility, Baird and Lizzie worked furiously at a cracked console. The data retrieved from the lab's core hinted at something buried even deeper, beneath the main sublevel, a locked vault without designation, hidden beneath decades of redacted files. Whatever had birthed the sires hadn't been fully contained. It had been isolated, and now it was active again. In orbit, the hammer of Dawn Network flickered to life. A single golden beam lanced through the clouds, vaporizing a swarm construct in mid-siege. But the retaliation was swift. A coordinated burst from the swarm's new artillery forms struck the satellite control uplink in New Ephra, severing connection. The beam died mid-fire. Hoffman slammed his fist against the command table. We're running out of time. Bring in the Scorchers. Light the ruins if you have to. We cannot let them get out of that city. Back on the ground, JD led the flank around the East Quarter, pushing toward a structure that still bore the insignia of the New Hope program. Inside, they found walls smeared with blood and words scratched in Locust runes. Translated roughly, it read, "The first dreamer wakes." As they advanced deeper, a chilling presence filled the air. JD's team encountered a creature unlike anything in their field reports. A being composed of neural webbing and black sinew, its form constantly shifting between swarm and human features. It didn't attack. It watched. It studied. When it finally moved, it spoke. Not in growls, but in words, echoing from every speaker in the complex. You are the descendants of failure, but you may yet serve. JD opened fire. The creature dispersed like smoke, retreating into a network of tunnels impossible to map. Meanwhile, Kate followed a signal weak but present Hannah Cole's last ping. Deep in the catacombs, she found a sealed door, its surface etched with glowing crimson veins. Behind it, muffled breathing, a heartbeat. She placed her palm on the lock. It opened. Inside, Hannah was alive but changed. Her skin bore the markings of the sires, her voice touched by resonance. They showed me everything, what we are, what they tried to bury. Kate raised her weapon. Tell me it didn't get to you. Hannah looked at her, sadness in her eyes. It got to all of us. Outside, the ground shook as the vault began to crack open. The first dreamer was no longer dormant, and the war for Sera was entering its final, most terrifying phase. Steam hissed from ruptured pipes as the vault beneath old Ephra cracked wider, its ancient mechanisms grinding against time-worn gears. The sound echoed like a scream, unnatural and rising from the depths of Sera itself. Kate stood at the threshold, rifle raised, watching as Hannah Cole stepped forward with eerie calm, her eyes shimmering with a violet hue that did not belong to any natural spectrum. "You need to see it," Hannah whispered. "You need to feel it." Dell and JD arrived seconds later, weapons hot, eyes wide at the sight of Hannah. JD's voice broke the tense silence. "She's compromised. Kate, we need to fall back." But Kate shook her head slowly. "No, she's still in there, I think." The chamber within the vault was vast, a cathedral of science and secrecy, forged in black iron and echoing with memories of the New Hope atrocities. Suspended in the center was a crystalline structure pulsing with energy, tendrils of light weaving through veins carved in the floor. Inside floated a humanoid shape, shifting constantly, its skin morphing between locust scales and human flesh, its expression unreadable. Baird's voice crackled through comms. "That's it. That's the dreamer. We always assumed it was a control entity, maybe the original genetic base of Mira's line. But it's not just a subject. It's a source." The moment Hannah touched the tendrils, the chamber lit up. Neural spikes surged through the room, connecting directly with every gear's neural uplink. Visions hit them, memories not their own. Sires screaming in glass tubes. Mira as a child, gifted and tormented. The truth: the Locust were never just a mistake. They were a solution to a dying human race, corrupted by desperation and secrecy. The dreamer opened its eyes, and the swarm above ground changed. Across the battlefield, soldiers watched as their enemies halted mid-charge. Then, sudden and synchronized, the swarm reorganized. More precise, more ruthless. Command AI from the dreamer now coursed through the hive mind, elevating instinct into strategy. In the ruins above, Colonel Hoffman stared at a live feed displaying the changes. This isn't war anymore, it's a conversion. Elsewhere, Marcus Fenix was leading a detachment through the northern mountains to locate what Baird had identified as a fallback conduit, a failsafe that could flood the entire Dreamer complex with emulsion fire, collapsing the vault. It had been built post-Hollow War, quietly, without public knowledge. It was never meant to be used. Inside the vault, Kate faced Hannah. "You said it showed you everything. Then you know what comes next." Hannah looked back, pain etched into every line of her face. "It wants peace, but its version of peace is assimilation. Harmony through surrender." Kate raised her rifle. "Then we don't give it peace. We give it resistance." She fired. The shot struck the crystalline core, sending the chamber into chaos. The dreamer screamed, and every swarm unit above recoiled in psychic backlash. JD grabbed Hannah as debris fell, dragging her away while Dell and Kate sprinted for the exit. From high orbit, Baird initiated the hammer relay. It would take 3 minutes to charge. Below, the dreamer began to reform, and the final war for control of the future of Sera had begun. The sun had only begun to rise over Jacinto when the thunder of gunships echoed across the capital. The last remnants of the Locust assault on the city's edge were being hunted down, and the smell of scorched earth clung to the wind like a bitter reminder. But there was no true silence in the aftermath, only the heavy footsteps of soldiers and the distant hum of machinery rebuilding what war had tried to erase. Marcus Fenix stood at the edge of a ruined building, his lancer resting against his shoulder, eyes scanning the horizon. Beneath the scars of grime and fatigue, his mind wasn't at ease. Victory was fleeting in a war without end. The Locust hadn't been eradicated, they had only retreated, and that was a temporary mercy. Behind him, Dom Santiago trudged through the rubble, kicking aside broken glass and cracked concrete. "Herd command wants us ready for a drop into the Badlands," he muttered. His voice was low, but there was a weariness behind it that couldn't be hidden anymore. "Figures," Marcus replied, unmoved. "They're not gonna stop until we've swept every last hole they crawl out of." "You think the hollow's really that big?" Marcus turned, his eyes locking with Dom's. "Big enough we still haven't found its heart." Down below, in the heart of the command post, Colonel Hoffman paced with the weight of too many years etched into his movements. Around him, tactical maps flickered with markers and shifting red zones. The situation was growing worse. Intel had confirmed signs of a new kind of Locust movement, coordinated, faster, and deeper underground. The old strategies weren't working anymore. "We're blind," said Anya Stroud, her voice calm but urgent over the comms feed. "SAT scans aren't penetrating past the outer hollow. Whatever's down there is blocking our signals." "Then we need eyes on the ground," Hoffman growled. He slammed his fist onto the table. "Send Delta. They've done it before. They'll do it again." So the order was passed, and Delta Squad was called once more into the depths. A Raven VTOL screeched overhead, wind kicking up clouds of ash as it landed just long enough for Marcus, Dom, Cole, and Baird to climb aboard. They were already geared and armored, not because they had to be, but because they always were. There was no safe moment, only quieter ones. "Tell me again why I signed up for this?" Baird grumbled, his voice half lost over the rotors. "Because you love my company?" Cole laughed, slapping him on the back. "And because without us, this whole damn planet would be buried in Locust." Yeah, hero complex much. But the banter couldn't mask the tension. As the Raven veered south toward the Badlands, all of them stared out the open side doors, watching the desolate terrain pass beneath. The hollow waited below, a dark world unseen by sunlight, carved out by centuries of silent war. There were secrets down there, and horrors. When the Raven dropped them at the edge of a new sinkhole, one so deep it seemed to pull the light inward, Marcus led the descent. Ropes hissed as they rappelled down, one by one, until the roar of engines above faded completely. Darkness enveloped them, and the sounds of the surface became memory. Down here it was another world. Roots of long-dead trees hung like veins from the ceiling. Stone twisted into unnatural forms. The air was thick, humming with vibrations, like the hollow itself was alive. "Lights on," Marcus ordered. Their helmets flickered to life with blue-white beams, cutting through the black. They moved slowly, weapons raised. The silence wasn't empty. It was hiding something. They found the first signs of trouble less than 10 minutes in. A squad of gear soldiers, or what was left of them, lay shredded along the walls of a narrow tunnel. Blood was sprayed high, claw marks etched deep into the rock. "This wasn't drones," Baird said quietly. "Something bigger," Dom whispered. Cole moved ahead, pointing with his lancer's barrel. "Tracks, not human, big, heavy, recent." Marcus knelt, running his hand over the disturbed dust. Something had moved fast, too fast. "Looks like they're adapting," he muttered. Then the rumble came, a tremor first, then a roar. The tunnel shook, loose stones falling like hail. A scream cut through the dark ahead. inhuman and furious. "Contact!" Marcus shouted. They raised their weapons just in time. From the shadows, something burst forth. 8 feet tall, armored in bone and plated flesh, claws like blades. It didn't charge, it pounced. The firefight exploded in deafening chaos. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness. Screams echoed down the corridor. The new creature, whatever it was, shrugged off bullets like they were pebbles. "It's not a locust," Baird yelled. "It's something else." Marcus slammed his chainsaw into its side, tearing through flesh with a burst of sparks and blood. The thing howled, backhanding him into the wall. He groaned but rose, blood streaking his visor. "We're not alone down here," he growled. And in the shadows beyond the tunnel, more eyes blinked open. The war wasn't just with the Locust anymore. It had only just begun. The creature's carcass steamed where it lay, thick blood soaking into the cracked tunnel floor. Its body twitched once more before going still, but the squad kept their rifles trained on it a few seconds longer, unwilling to take chances. Whatever it had been, it was strong, fast, and intelligent. "Everyone still breathing?" Marcus asked, pushing off the tunnel wall, his ribs aching beneath his armor. "Barely," Cole muttered, clutching a gouge in his shoulder pad. "Damn thing hit like a Brumac on steroids." "We're alive," Dom confirmed, sweeping his lancer across the darkness. "But we need to keep moving. That noise is gonna draw more." Baird knelt beside the dead creature, examining its features. Alien and grotesque, even by Locust standards. This thing's not in any COG records. It's not from up top, and it sure as hell isn't from the hollow we know. Marcus narrowed his eyes. "Then what is it?" Baird stood, brushing off his gloves. "A new evolution, or a new enemy. Either way, we're in deep." The tunnel they'd entered widened ahead, its walls more carved than collapsed, like something had made it with purpose. Every step they took echoed with unease, their lights casting long, twitching shadows on the rock. Soon they entered a vast chamber, the ceiling lost in darkness. Strange bioluminescent fungi clung to the walls, pulsing like veins beneath skin. At the center stood what looked like a spire, natural, yet arranged in a pattern too precise to be coincidence. "This place wasn't just dug out," Dom whispered. "It was built." Marcus approached the spire, running a gloved hand along its surface. Glyphs had been etched into the stone, angular, harsh, not Locust script, but something older. "Get this on cam," he told Baird. As Baird activated his scanner, a whisper of wind passed through the chamber, though they were deep underground. It carried a scent of decay, but also something else. Ozone like the air before lightning. Anya's voice crackled over the comms, heavy with static. "Delta, we're losing your signal. Say again. What's your status?" "We found something," Marcus replied. "Not Locust, not human. Structure, symbols. Something old. Maybe pre-hollow." There was a pause. Then Hoffman's voice broke through, rough and clipped. "Extract what you can and move out. If there's something else down there, we need to know before it knows about us." But it already did. Before Delta could move, a low tone rang out, deep and resonant, vibrating in their bones. The spire had awakened, its glyphs now glowing with a sickly green light. The fungi pulsed in response, and the walls began to hum. "This is bad," Baird muttered. The ground beneath them trembled again, more violently this time. Chunks of ceiling rained down. From the far end of the chamber came the sound of stone splitting, and then a voice. Not speech exactly, but a resonance of intent, like something speaking in thoughts rather than words. Cole raised his lancer, What the hell is that? From the cracked wall emerged a figure, humanoid, tall, cloaked in armor that shimmered like obsidian. Its eyes glowed, not with heat or hatred, but something colder, measured, calculating. Dom took a step back. That's not Locust. No, Marcus agreed. That's something worse. The figure raised a hand and the air warped. Delta was thrown back by an unseen force, slammed against stone like toys in a child's tantrum. As Marcus tried to rise, pain lancing through his side, he glimpsed others stepping from the shadows. More of them, each different but unified in design. Not monsters, soldiers. Fall back, Marcus shouted. Gunfire erupted, but it was like shooting into a storm. Bullets slowed midair. Some melted in bursts of unnatural heat. Still, Delta fought because that was all they could do. Baird launched a grenade, the explosion lighting the chamber in hellish red. One of the figures fell, its armor shattered. The others paused as if analyzing, learning. They're testing us, Marcus growled. They're studying how we fight. Cole dragged Dom behind cover. Then let's make it a lesson they regret. But even as they held their ground, Delta knew. This was no longer just about survival. The war had changed. The enemy had changed. And somewhere deep within this ancient world beneath the hollow, something waited. Something that had been asleep. Something that was now wide awake. The silence that followed was more suffocating than the battle itself. Delta huddled behind chunks of shattered stone, their breath heavy, weapons slick with sweat and blood. The figures had vanished back into the dark, not retreating in fear, but withdrawing like predators that had learned enough from the kill. Their absence lingered like a warning. "Report," Marcus rasped, his voice ragged. "I'm good," Dom answered first, limping but upright. "Banged up, but I'll live," said Cole, checking the dented plating on his chest. Baird winced as he pressed a hand to his ribs. Cracked armor, bruised everything. "But yeah, I'm breathing." Marcus reloaded his lancer. "Then we keep moving. We need a route to the surface." But the hollow wasn't letting them go easily. The tunnels had shifted, passages rearranged, landmarks erased. The spire chamber was gone, replaced by new stone corridors slick with moisture and choked by vines that hadn't been there minutes before. "It's changing," Dom muttered, running his hand along the damp wall, "like it's alive." "This isn't natural," Baird said, his voice tight. "Seismic movement doesn't do this. Something's warping the terrain." They pressed forward, eyes alert, boots echoing down endless halls. Every corner promised a new threat. The air grew hotter, staler, thick with the scent of minerals and something faintly metallic, like dried blood. Finally, they stumbled upon a sealed blast door half buried in the stone. Ancient, rusted, and marked with symbols faded almost to nothing. "COG issue," Marcus noted, brushing away grime. "But this isn't on any map." Cole approached the control panel, its lights flickering weakly to life. "Got some juice left. I think I can get it open." The door groaned as gears twisted and squealed, the lock releasing with a hiss. Beyond it lay another world, an old research facility half collapsed, swallowed by the hollow centuries ago. Dust motes hung in the air like ash, and shattered terminals blinked in and out of function. "Looks like this place got buried during Emergence Day," Baird guessed, scanning the equipment. "COG must have been doing something down here long before the war started." "Like what?" Dom asked. Baird tapped on a cracked console. "Trying to find what lived under us. Maybe trying to control it." "That didn't go well," Marcus said grimly. They moved through the wreckage in silence until they reached a chamber lined with cryotubes. Some shattered, others still frosted over. Inside one, a body floated in suspension, clad in armor unlike anything COG had ever issued. Cole exhaled slowly. What the hell were they making? Baird read the faded label beside the tube. Project Revenant. Experiment Log 17. Biofusion, neural symbiosis. Damn it, they weren't just studying locust biology. They were merging it. Dom stepped back. You're saying these things we're fighting, they're not locust? No, Baird said. They're worse. They're ours. The room fell into stillness, the weight of that revelation settling like lead in their lungs. Then the lights cut out. Emergency reds flickered on, bathing the chamber in hellish glow. Outside the door, something scratched. Marcus raised his weapon. Positions. Whatever we woke up, it knows we're here. The door shuddered, then cracked. The hollow wasn't the enemy. The real enemy had been waiting beneath it all along. The door exploded inward. Shrapnel flew as the frame twisted, metal screeching like tortured bone. The thing that emerged was hunched and plated, hungrily sniffing the air through a broken mask fused to its skull. Its movements were calculated, deliberate, intelligent. Marcus fired first, the Lancer's chainsaw roaring to life before rounds even left the barrel. The creature darted aside with unnatural speed, catching Cole with a backhand that sent him flying into a console. Cole! Dom shouted, lunging forward. He opened fire as Marcus flanked right, forcing the creature between two angles. Baird ducked behind the cryotube, cursing under his breath as sparks flew past his head. This thing's not just fast. It's learning, Baird shouted. It's predicting us. The creature lunged for Marcus, claws outstretched. But Marcus dropped to one knee, lifted the Lancer, and caught it under the jaw with a stream of bullets. The thing staggered, shrieking in fury. Cole, already on his feet again, barreled in from the side and tackled it into a wall of ancient pipes. Steam hissed from ruptured valves, obscuring everything in a blinding cloud. When the vapor cleared, the creature was gone. This is getting worse, Baird said, panting. Whatever the hell Project Revenant was, it didn't stop with a few tubes. That thing was advanced. COG knew it too, Marcus said grimly, eyeing the shattered facility. That's why they buried it. Dom crouched by a smashed console, his eyes catching the last flickers of a corrupted recording. Containment breach, the voice rasped. Do not let it surface. If it reaches. The audio cut out. Baird turned to Marcus. We can't let this thing get out. We're deep in the hollow, and we've got a chance to stop it before it spreads. Marcus nodded slowly. We find the heart of this place. We bring it down. They moved quickly now, deeper into the complex. Every corridor screamed of old sins. Mangled corpses sealed into walls, tanks filled with failed hybrids, each one more horrific than the last. They were walking through a graveyard of experiments. All this, Cole said quietly, just to win a war. Dom shook his head. No, this wasn't about ending it. This was about surviving it no matter the cost. As they entered the main power core, they found what remained of the original scientists. Skeletal forms slumped against panels, some with pistols still in their hands. One terminal still hummed weakly. Baird accessed it, his eyes scanning. There's a failsafe, core overload, but it'll blow half this hollow with it. Do it, Marcus ordered. We finish this. It's not remote, Baird warned. Manual trigger in the reactor shaft. One of us has to stay. Silence gripped the squad. Then Cole stepped forward. I'll do it. No, Marcus said immediately. We all walk out or none of us do. We find another way. The ground shook violently. A roar echoed from deep below. It's coming back, Dom whispered. Marcus clenched his fists. Then we lure it to the shaft. Bring it down with the whole damn lab. The plan was suicide, but it was the only plan they had. Because above them, the world still slept, unaware of what clawed at the surface. And Delta Squad was the only thing standing between that world and the nightmare beneath. The lights dimmed. Sparks danced along the floor as emergency power flickered through ancient cables. Somewhere far beneath them, gears ground and engines groaned to life, awakened from decades of dormancy. The lab was no longer just a graveyard, it was stirring. Delta Squad stood shoulder to shoulder, encircled by broken terminals and glowing vats of failed monstrosities. The plan was simple, but the path to execution was chaos. Movement, East Corridor, Dom shouted. They turned as the creature returned, only now it wasn't alone. Behind it slithered more shapes, malformed and reeking of decay. Half-finished hybrids. Some crawled, others skittered. All of them forged from desperate ambition and the remnants of Locust flesh. Eyes gleamed in the dark, and the air filled with guttural snarls. They're coming out of the woodwork, Cole said, revving his lancer. Then we hold, Marcus replied. We draw the Alpha to the shaft, and we make damn sure it dies here. Baird sprinted ahead, diving into the control station overlooking the reactor shaft. I've got access. Starting overload sequence now. You've got 10 minutes before this place becomes a crater. The hybrids attacked. Gunfire exploded through the corridor, the sound rolling like thunder through the metal walls. Marcus was everywhere, barking orders, laying down suppressive fire, chainsaw flashing red. Dom kept close, his shotgun blazing point blank into crawling horrors. Cole fought like a batter on the warpath, his strength a blunt instrument of survival. Every swing, every burst, was fueled by a primal refusal to die. Come on, you freaks, he shouted. You want out? You go through me. The Alpha stalked through the carnage, unaffected by the slaughter. It was watching, waiting. Its mind was calculating, its purpose not just to kill, but to learn. Marcus caught its eye. Hey, over here, you ugly bastard. He broke into a run, firing wildly, leading the creature through twisted corridors toward the shaft. It followed and raged. Dom, with me! Dom peeled off, hurling a grenade behind them to slow the pursuing swarm. The shaft came into view. Steam poured from ruptured pipes, and the hum of the reactor grew louder with every step. The catwalk trembled under Marcus' boots as he crossed to the center platform. The Alpha burst through the final doorway. Marcus turned, emptying his lancer into its chest. Come on, you want me? You got me. The beast lunged. Marcus dove aside as Dom activated the bridge release. The floor gave way beneath the Alpha, and it tumbled down into the heart of the reactor, claws scrabbling against metal, screaming as it fell. Baird's voice crackled over comms. That's it. Overload initiated. This place is gonna light up. Marcus and Dom ran. The ground began to shake. Above them, concrete groaned and cracked as the hollow began to collapse. Dust rained like ash. Fire surged behind them, eating the corridors. They burst back into the main chamber, Cole and Baird already sprinting for the exit tunnel. Go, 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 Marcus shouted. They ran through the fire. The lab erupted behind them, a bloom of white-hot energy swallowing everything. The shockwave hurled them forward, and the tunnel caved in behind their boots. Darkness, silence, then coughing. movement. One by one, they rose from the dust. Burned, bloodied, alive. They emerged into the surface light as Jacinto dawned again. No cheers waited for them, no banners, just the silence of a world that would never know what they stopped. But that was enough, because heroes weren't made in sunlight. They were forged in the fire beneath it. The wind howled over the ravaged plain, carrying with it the ash of 1,000 buried battles. Delta Squad stood in silence at the edge of the crater. What remained of the underground lab was nothing but molten ruin now. Its secrets vaporized, its nightmares sealed beneath rock and fire. Yet the shadows in Marcus Fenix's eyes hadn't lifted. "They built that place before E-Day," Baird muttered, shaking his head. "Maybe even before the hammer strikes. That wasn't just some locust nest. Someone on our side knew. Someone let it happen." Marcus didn't answer. He stared at the horizon as if trying to see through time. Cole leaned against a charred rock, panting. "Man, I've seen some crazy stuff, but that takes the cake. Ain't no playbook for this." Dom adjusted the bandage around his forearm, blood soaking through. "The war's changing. The Locust, those things, they're not just adapting, they're evolving." A raven swept down from the sky, kicking up a storm of dust as it landed nearby. Anya's voice crackled through the headset. "Command wants debrief ASAP. Colonel Hoffman's already prepping next steps." Baird scoffed. "Of course he is. Bet he's got a whole new hell waiting for us." Marcus turned toward the chopper. "Then let's not keep hell waiting." They boarded the Raven, the ramp closing behind them with a mechanical groan. Engines roared, and the machine lifted into the blood-colored sky. Hours passed in debriefings and silence. No one said much. What could be said? Words couldn't erase what they saw, what they killed, what they learned. That night, Jacinto was quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before a storm. Hoffman stood over a table littered with satellite scans and classified reports. Anya watched him from across the room, her expression unreadable. "We're losing this war," he said finally, voice like gravel. "Not because we're weak, but because we're still fighting it like it's the same war we started." Anya stepped forward. "You think there's more labs? More of those prototypes?" "I know there are." He turned, eyes heavy with burden. "We need to change our strategy. We need to hit them where they live, not just with bullets, with truth, with exposure. We dig into our own past just as deep as we dig into theirs." Back in the barracks, Marcus sat alone. The silence gnawed at him more than any gunfire ever could. He removed the COG tags from his neck and stared at them, thumb tracing the etched names. "We were never just fighting monsters," he muttered. Dom entered the room quietly, sitting beside him. "We're fighting ourselves." Marcus looked up. "Then maybe it's time we started winning." Far below Jacinto, in a hollow yet untouched by human eyes, the ground trembled. The Locust weren't idle. Not anymore. Queens don't retreat forever. And evolution never sleeps. The Locust stronghold beneath the eastern cliffs had remained untouched for too long, hidden by layers of bedrock and misinformation. As the COG scrambled to realign its fractured intelligence networks, Delta Squad found themselves once more at the edge of the unknown. The Raven touched down in a dry basin riddled with the twisted remains of old convoy trucks. Whatever had ambushed them left no survivors. Skeletons lay twisted in rusted armor, weapons still gripped in lifeless hands. "Welcome to the end of the road," Cole muttered, stepping onto the cracked earth. Marcus raised his lancer and scanned the jagged horizon. "Keep your eyes open. This place stinks of an ambush." They moved carefully through the wreckage, boots crunching glass and charred bone. The cliffs rose around them like a broken mouth, and the entrance to the hollow yawned wide, unnatural, like something had chewed through the rock from the inside. Inside, the temperature dropped. The light faded fast. Dom lit a flare, tossing it down the incline. It bounced once, twice, and disappeared into a pit so deep even echoes refused to return. "You sure this is the right tunnel?" Baird asked. "Only one wide enough for what we saw last time," Marcus said. "That thing needed space to move. This is where it came from." They descended. The air was thick with rot. Pockets of luminescent mold clung to the walls, casting eerie green light. Strange chittering sounds echoed from deeper below. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the hum of their gear and the distant drip of water. Then they found it, a nest, not of locust, of something else. Eggs, massive, veined, pulsing. Dom backed away. "That's not locust. I don't know what that is." "It's growing down here," Marcus said grimly, "and it's not waiting for permission." Suddenly, the walls vibrated. A high-pitched scream tore through the tunnel as something burst from the far chamber. 6 limbs, bone-plated, blind eyes glowing. Delta opened fire, but the creature was fast, weaving through bullets, slashing with serrated claws. Cole was knocked flat, barely lifting his boot in time to kick the thing off. Dom and Baird flanked it, luring it toward Marcus, who revved his chainsaw bayonet and drove it straight into its core. Blood sprayed, sizzling like acid against the rock. Screamed once more, then died. "They're not just evolving," Baird panted. "They're multiplying." "This tunnel doesn't end here," Marcus said. "This is just one den, one hive." Behind them, more shrieks echoed in the dark. There would be no turning back. The tunnel twisted downward into the abyss, deeper than any recorded sector of the hollow. Delta Squad pushed forward, silent now, each step punctuated by the hiss of breath and the soft crack of stone underfoot. The path narrowed into a ribbed corridor, its walls lined with a chitinous substance that flexed slightly with every touch. Felt like walking through the throat of a living thing. Dom's voice broke the silence, low and tight. "We're not in Locust territory anymore. This is something else." Marcus didn't reply. He was listening. Something in the air had changed. Not just the dampness or the cold, it was heavier. Presence. Then they heard it. A distant mechanical thrum, rhythmic like a heartbeat. Not a machine. Not natural. It seemed to reverberate through the walls. Baird adjusted his visor. "Thermals are spiking ahead. There's a chamber, big one, and..." The tunnel opened up. They emerged into a cavern the size of a stadium. At the center stood a tower of organic matter, spiraling upward like a hive spire. Around it, clusters of the new creatures moved in coordinated patterns, watching, building, feeding. "My God," Dom breathed. "They're constructing something." The tower pulsed with a sickly red glow. From within, they could hear the sound of birthing, wet, pulpy movements, shrieks of newborn things. Marcus lifted his lancer. "We're burning this place down." Baird was already pulling thermite charges from his pack. "Fast and loud, or quiet and clean?" "There's no quiet way out of this." They split, planting explosives around the base of the spire. As they worked, the hive creatures grew restless. A low chorus of screeches echoed through the cavern. Then the glow shifted. A shadow moved behind the hive tower, massive, hulking. A new creature stepped into view, twice the size of the others, plated in obsidian armor, its head crowned with bone-like fins, eyes like Cole's unblinking. "Oh hell," Cole said. "That one's in charge." It roared, a sound so deep it rattled their teeth. The hive surged. "Fall back," Marcus yelled. Creatures poured from the walls, the ceiling, the floors. Delta Squad fought their way back toward the tunnel, carving through the swarm. Explosions rocked the chamber behind them as the charges blew, ripping through the spire. Flames engulfed the birthing pods. Screeches turned to wails. Marcus turned, emptying his clip into the towering beast. It didn't fall, but it bled. Dark, oily ichor spilled from its side. They reached the corridor, sealing the blast door behind them just as a clawed limb struck the steel with a thunderous clang. Baird slumped against the wall, gasping. "Tell me we got enough data." "We got enough to know," Marcus said. "This isn't just another Locust strain." Dom nodded slowly. "It's another war, one we didn't see coming." And behind that sealed door, something screamed in fury. The Hollow was no longer just a battlefield. It was an awakening. The march back to the surface wasn't a retreat. It was a warning delivered on weary legs. Delta Squad moved in silence, the weight of what they'd seen pressing heavier than their gear. Each echo in the tunnels sounded like it might carry teeth, each tremor like the pulse of something still following. Marcus kept his lancer raised even when no target was in sight. Habits formed in darkness died slowly. At the surface, dawn had barely broken when the Raven touched down, blades stirring dust and ash into spirals. The 4 soldiers climbed aboard, their armor scorched and marked, eyes drawn and silent. The moment the ramp closed, Anya's voice crackled through the onboard comms. "Status." Marcus answered, voice cold. "Contact confirmed. Not Locust. Something else. Bigger. Smarter. They're organizing." Back in Jacinto, Colonel Hoffman stared down at the tactical display, watching as red zones expanded on the digital map. Anya turned toward him, eyes grim. "We've got recordings, thermal scans, partial biological reads. It's all anomalous. No Locust strain matches." "And the tower?" "Destroyed, but not before it birthed at least a dozen new forms." Hoffman's fist tightened. "We need to talk to Chairman Prescott. This changes everything." Prescott arrived within the hour, flanked by security and followed by advisors who spoke in clipped, rehearsed tones. Marcus stood silent as Hoffman laid out the report. When it ended, Prescott paced, hand curled under his chin. "So we have a new enemy, one emerging from the same underground network as the Locust. Could be evolution, could be something older." "It's not evolution," Marcus said, cutting in. "It's design. Those things didn't just grow. They were bred." "You're saying the Hollows more than just tunnels?" "It's a womb." The room went still. Prescott exhaled. "Then we change tactics. We isolate and contain." "It won't work," Dom interjected. "We barely got out. They're multiplying, building. They'll come to us. Then we hit first. We launch a full incursion fire, steel, and ground pounders. We seal it from the inside." Orders were given, new weapons tested, but in the shadows beneath Jacinto, the enemy moved. Not with chaos, but with calculation. The shattered hive began to repair. The Alpha, wounded but living, roared commands into the dark. Elsewhere in the Hollow, deeper still, a chamber opened, a cradle of ancient design, predating even the Locust. Inside, something old stirred in a cocoon of flesh and stone. Eyes blinked open for the first time in centuries. The war was no longer for survival. It was for the future of the surface itself. Thunder cracked across the plateau as Jacinto's engines of war awoke once more. Convoys rumbled toward staging grounds. Railguns were mounted onto siege walkers. Hammer of Dawn satellites were repositioned in orbit. The enemy had evolved, and now humanity would answer with fire. Delta Squad prepped in silence, suiting up inside a hardened bunker beneath the command center. The mood was grim, the air filled with the metallic scent of oil and ozone. No one spoke of what they had seen in the hollow, not the alpha creature, not the breeding chambers, not the implication that the Locust were just the surface of something deeper. "Dom," Marcus said, locking his armor into place. "You good?" Dom looked up slowly, hands trembling just before they closed around his lancer. "No, but that never mattered, did it?" Marcus nodded. That was all that needed saying. Baird ran final diagnostics on a seismic drill, the weaponized tunneler designed to breach the hollow directly without relying on natural sinkholes. "You realize this thing's got a 1 in 3 chance of caving in on us before it even punches through, right? Guess we better be fast," Cole grinned, checking the drum on his Nasha shotgun. "You know how I like it." A voice echoed over the intercom. "Delta Squad, report to Bay 6. You're going under." The seismic drill fired at dusk, shattering the earth with molten precision. The tunnel it left behind steamed with chemical residue, sloping into blackness like a throat-swallowing light. Marcus led the way, boots crunching over scorched rock. Behind him, the rest of Delta followed without hesitation. As they descended, the walls pulsed with bioluminescent veins that hadn't been there before. The hollow had changed. It was growing. Miles in, they reached a vast underground basin, where the remnants of locust hives lay in ruins, destroyed not by human hands, but by something else. Corpses were shredded, melted, half assimilated into walls. From the center of the basin, a new tower rose, organic, spined, still wet with birth. It pulsed in rhythm with the distant sounds of movement. "That's not Locust tech," Baird whispered. "It's biomechanical, engineered." "By who?" Dom asked. Marcus stepped forward, staring at the tower. "Or by what?" Suddenly the ground shook. Not a tremor, footsteps. Huge, approaching. From the far edge of the cavern came a roar, low and deep, like a mountain mourning. A shape emerged, twice the size of a corpser, covered in armor that writhed like muscle. And on its back, embedded into its flesh, were remnants of Locust tech, repurposed, twisted. The beast charged. "Move!" Marcus bellowed. Gunfire erupted, but bullets barely slowed it. Cole lobbed grenades. Baird lit up a torque bow. The creature plowed through the barrage, slamming into a stalagmite and sending debris flying. Dom rolled to cover and shouted, "Flank it, Marcus! Go right!" Marcus dashed through the haze, diving toward an exposed nerve cluster beneath the beast's spine. He jammed a grenade in and rolled away just before it detonated. The creature screamed, truly screamed, then fell to its knees, convulsing. But even in death, it sent a signal, a pulse through the air. "They're connected," Baird muttered, "like a hive mind." Far beyond the basin, in the deepest dark, more eyes opened. And they were not Locust. They were older. A low vibration traveled through the stone, barely perceptible but constant, like a heartbeat deep beneath the hollow. Delta Squad regrouped around the fallen beast, their breath fogging in the unnatural cold now seeping into the cavern. "This thing was fused with Locust parts," Baird said, scanning it with his wrist device. "Not just tech, organics too. They were experimenting, maybe even splicing." "Means there's a lab," Marcus growled, "and someone's still running it." Dom stared at the distant black beyond the tower. Someone or something. They pushed forward, through the basin's far tunnel where the walls narrowed and the air grew warmer again, sticky and humid. Strange glyphs marked the stone, neither Locust script nor human. The symbols pulsed faintly, as if they responded to the squad's presence. Cole touched one. These ain't just for show. This place is alive. The tunnel opened into a chamber, a cathedral of bone and metal. The architecture was impossible. Symmetrical yet writhing, grown instead of built. At the far end, hanging from a vertical pillar of flesh and steel, was a pod as large as a raven. Lights flickered within it. Shapes moved. Marcus motioned silently. They fanned out. As they approached, the pod split open with a wet hiss, and a humanoid figure fell forward onto the floor. It was female, draped in membrane and fluid, eyes wide with horror but unmistakably aware. She gasped, "Are you Cog?" "Yeah," Dom said, stepping forward carefully. "You're human. What the hell are you doing down here?" "They took me from Montevideo years ago. I think I was part of an experiment. I saw things, machines growing out of people. They called it the Convergence." "What's the Convergence?" Baird asked. She shuddered. "They're merging Locust biology with something else, something ancient. Beneath all this, even they're afraid of it." The ground rumbled again, this time stronger. Not footsteps, a breath. From every tunnel, the distant click of claws began. Marcus turned. "Time to go. Now." They pulled the woman to her feet and sprinted back toward the entry tunnel. Behind them, a howl rose that froze the blood, neither locust nor human. As they climbed toward the seismic drill's shaft, the walls around them began to shift, closing, reshaping. "It's sealing us in," Baird shouted. Marcus reached the uplink panel on the drill and slammed the emergency beacon. "Anya, pull us out. We need evac now." Static. "Then, we see you. Hang tight. Raven en route. 2 minutes." Cole turned and fired into the dark as shadows darted closer. 2 minutes too long. They formed a perimeter at the drill mouth, watching the corridor writhe with movement. The woman crouched behind them, eyes closed, whispering something over and over. Dom listened. "What is she saying?" Baird translated. "It's old Saran. She's saying, 'The deep one wakes.'" Above them, rotor blades cut through dust. A raven descended fast. Marcus shouted, "Go!" One by one, they hauled each other aboard. As the raven pulled up, a tendril shot from below, nearly catching the skids. Dom fired, severing it. As they rose above the sinkhole, a massive eye opened far below, reflective, ancient, and filled with knowing rage. "What the hell is that?" Cole breathed. Marcus stared. "The end. If we don't stop it." And in the hollow, the deep one watched them flee, its awakening only beginning. The raven's engines howled as it tore through the blood-orange sky, Jacinto's silhouette rising like a fortress of hope against a world collapsing into shadow. Below, the earth continued to crack. Sinkholes widened like open wounds, swallowing remnants of cities and forests with equal indifference. Inside the Raven, Delta Squad sat in heavy silence. The rescued woman, pale and trembling, had lapsed into a fugue state. Her fingers clutched at the harness straps as if they were the only thing keeping her anchored to reality. "We need to get her into medical," Dom said, glancing at Anya's feed. "If half of what she said is true, we're screwed." Anya's voice crackled through the cockpit. "Command wants debriefing immediately. Hoffman's waiting." Marcus nodded but said nothing. His mind was already racing. The eye, the lab, the glyphs, the deep one. It all pointed to something older than the Locust, older than any war they'd fought. Back at HQ, as the Raven touched down, medics swept in to take the survivor. Hoffman met Delta on the tarmac, his face more stone than flesh now, etched deep with worry. "You saw it?" he asked bluntly. Marcus met his gaze. We saw something not Locust, bigger, older. The hollow's just the skin. What's under it is what's really been pulling the strings, Baird cut in. And they've been experimenting, splicing, building something worse. Hoffman didn't flinch. We had rumors, seismic readings that didn't match any known tunnels, but nothing concrete. Until now. Dom stepped forward. What do we do? Hoffman looked up at the sky. A faint rumble echoed from the south. Too distant for artillery, too deep for storms. We go deeper, he said. We find out what the hell this deep one is, and we kill it. Marcus frowned. You really think we can kill something like that? Hoffman didn't answer. Inside the war room, satellite feeds blinked with red patches, emerging across the planet. Not just in the hollow, the corruption was spreading. It's like a network, Anya explained. The convergence. It's not just a lab experiment. It's a system, a hive trying to expand. Cole leaned in. You saying the Locust were just... what? Tools? Maybe, Baird muttered. Maybe they were the first to fall. The lights dimmed. Anya brought up a deep seismic scan, the kind used to map tectonic fault lines. But now it showed movement, something coiled far beneath the crust. Pulsed. That's the heart of it, Anya said. It's not stationary. It moves, thinks. And it's waking up, Dom added. Marcus stared at the scan, jaw set. Then we find its core, and we hit it with everything we've got. Preparations began immediately. Special deep strike drills were retrofitted. Hammer of Dawn satellites repositioned. A new war map was drawn, one not of land, but of layers, of depths. But time was slipping. That night, Jacinto trembled. A sound, like a groan of something ancient turning in its sleep, rolled through the bedrock. Below, in the hollow, the deep one uncoiled. It had watched humanity long enough. Now it would speak. The voice came not in words, but in pressure, like the weight of the ocean forced into the cracks of their minds. It was a soundless message that pressed against every soldier's skull, like gravity itself had chosen to whisper. Marcus was the first to feel it. One moment he stood in the armory, locking fresh mags into place. The next, he froze, a deep cold blooming behind his eyes. Images poured in, towers of bone rising through cavernous abysses, cities drowned in stone, and a mouth that was not a mouth opening in infinite dark. Marcus, Dom's voice pulled him back. You good? Marcus blinked. The armory light stung. Yeah, he lied. But it wasn't just him. Across the base, gears were reporting headaches, disorientation, lost time. Psych officers chalked it up to stress. But those who'd been to the hollow knew better. It's the deep one, Baird said, scanning a neurofeedback chart. It's pushing into the upper layers of cognition, like it's testing us. Or warning us, Anya added quietly. The next mission was unlike any before. A combined strike team, Delta, Zulu, Echo, would descend into a new fissure opening west of Landone. It wasn't on any map, but seismic sensors showed the ground hollowing fast. Whatever was stirring, it was drawing energy from the mantle itself. As the ravens dropped them in, the wind screamed like a dying machine. The entrance yawned like the throat of some ancient beast. Lights flickered. Radio comms hissed with static. Inside, the stone was smoother than any natural formation. Lines ran along the walls, veins of glowing green, pulsing faintly. Machinery grown like tumors, technology and biology indistinguishable. This isn't Locust architecture, Baird whispered. Dom swept his lancer across the corridor. Then who built it? No one answered. They moved deeper. The tunnel narrowed, then opened again into a chamber the size of a stadium. In its center, an altar. Around it, hundreds of human bodies, fresh, laid in spirals. None showed wounds. All looked peaceful, as if they had simply stopped living. "It's a ritual site," Anya said through the drone feed. "No," Marcus muttered. "It's a message." He stepped forward. The altar pulsed once. Then the walls shimmered, not with movement but with thought, projection. Images flared. Humanity's wars, its cruelty, its noise. Then silence. Then the Locust. Then the deep one watching from below. "It doesn't want conquest," Dom whispered. "It wants quiet." A form emerged from the altar, not physical, not light. Presence. It stood tall, cloaked in echoes, its face a blank void. In every soldier's mind, it spoke. "You are the scream in the deep, the fire in the stillness. Cease, or be silenced." The image faded, the altar dimmed, and in the moment that followed, seismic alarms triggered. "Multiple breaches," Anya's voice broke through. "All across Jacinto. It's coming." Marcus turned. "Then we don't wait. We take the fight to the core. Now." War had found its god, and Delta Squad would be the heretics who dared to strike it. The last light of day had vanished behind Jacinto's skyline as the city groaned with the pressure of what stirred beneath. Every street trembled. Civilians were evacuated en masse, while gear platoons formed defensive lines at every strategic point. But Marcus knew it wouldn't matter. Whatever was coming wasn't going to storm the gates. It was going to rise through them. Delta Squad stood in the main lift chamber at East Barricade Academy. It had been repurposed for deep core drilling, the only way to reach the subterranean fissure before it swallowed more of the planet. The lift shuddered as they descended, chains groaning, lights flickering overhead. "I hate elevators," Cole muttered. "You hate heights," Baird corrected. "This is different. This is enclosed, vertical death." "Much better," Cole deadpanned. Marcus didn't speak. He stared into the dark as the walls passed in rhythmic intervals. His mind kept returning to that voice. The pressure, the warning. It wasn't fear he felt. It was the certainty that they were crossing a threshold no one was meant to. The lift clanged to a stop. The doors opened to a tunnel unlike the others. This one breathed. The air was warm, wet. A heartbeat pulsed through the ground beneath their boots. "This is where the science ends," Dom said. "And something else begins," Baird added. They moved in formation, light sweeping across walls that pulsed with sickly bioluminescence. The floor beneath them was hard, but not stone, not metal, something in between. Then they saw it. A canyon, but not carved by erosion. This was shaped with impossible symmetry, descending into an abyss of lightless space. In its center, a spire, floating, rotating, humming. "Is that a machine?" Baird whispered. "It's alive," Cole said, his voice distant. Marcus stepped forward. The humming grew louder. Behind them, the tunnel collapsed. The way out was gone. "No choice now," Marcus growled. "We finished this." They crossed a narrow bridge toward the spire. As they reached it, the hum became a vibration in their bones. And then, without warning, the spire opened. From within emerged a figure, taller than a corpser, thinner than a drone. It glided, not walked. Its body was a lattice of bone, steel, and light. Its head was crowned with writhing tendrils. Spoke, not aloud, but into them. "You are children of the surface, loud, bright, broken. Your kind ends here." Marcus raised his lancer. "Not today." The battle ignited in chaos. The entity moved like smoke, lashing with tendrils that shattered stone. Delta fanned out, pouring fire into its core. Dom flanked left. Cole charged right. Baird lobbed grenades into the spire's heart. Nothing stopped it, until Marcus reached the altar at its base. He slammed a charge into the console, overloading the pulsing circuits. Light flared. The creature shrieked, high, endless, collapsing inward as if it were being erased. The canyon buckled. The spire fell. Marcus shouted, "Rope line, now!" One by one, they climbed as the world below crumbled into itself. Dust and fire surged upward, chasing them like the breath of a dying god. They burst through the surface just as the ground sealed shut behind them. The hollow was gone, buried. But as the dust settled and the stars returned, no one spoke, because they had heard the final whisper. "We are not the last, we are the first." The winds over Jacinto had gone still. Not a bird moved across the skyline. Not a single branch stirred. From the charred earth to the fractured rooftops, everything held its breath. And within that uneasy silence, a weight began to settle on the shoulders of those who had survived. The battle was over, but no one called it victory. Delta Squad stood at the ruins of the extraction point, gear worn and scorched, faces blank with exhaustion. The emergency beacon blinked in the ash beside them, a faint pulse in a world gone quiet. No one knew what they had awakened beneath the hollow, only that it had spoken, and it had not died. Dom paced. He had cleaned his Lancer 3 times already, not from dirt, but nerves. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't Locust. "No," Baird said, "and it wasn't human either. We've been fighting grubs in the dark, and this whole time there's been something else deeper. Watching. Waiting," Marcus added. Cole squinted toward the horizon. "So now what? We dig deeper, fight ghosts." A raven finally appeared in the distance, its rotors slicing the still air. As it descended, Colonel Hoffman's voice cut through the static on comms. "Delta, prepare for immediate evac. We're regrouping." Marcus clicked the comm. "We need answers, Colonel. That wasn't part of any Locust intel." Hoffman didn't respond right away. "Then, you'll get your answers. But first, you're heading to Azura." The word hung in the air like a buried secret. "Azura's a myth," Baird said. "A ghost facility. Doesn't exist." "It does now," Marcus muttered. The Raven touched down and lifted them away from the dead city. As they rose above the skyline, they saw what no satellite ever had. The sinkholes weren't isolated. They were part of a pattern. A spiral spreading from a central point miles beneath the surface. Azura waited at its heart. Hours later, the island loomed on the sea like a scar. Hidden by storm generators and illusions, it was a monument to secrecy. The Raven cut through the clouds, revealing towering structures of steel and glass, untouched by war. Yet inside, the people weren't soldiers. They were scientists. Anya met them at the landing pad. She looked older, tired, but her eyes burned with urgency. "Welcome to the last card Soji ever held," she said. "Everything they never told us is here. Come on." As they moved through sterile halls, displays flickered to life, showing schematics of creatures not yet seen. The enemy wasn't the Locust alone. There had been others. Long before E-Day, experiments, artifacts, signals traced to points beyond Sera's orbit. "You're saying this thing, the one we fought, it's not from here?" Dom asked. "We don't know where it's from," Anya replied. "Only that the Locust were trying to keep it buried, and now it's awake." Marcus stopped in front of a sealed chamber. Inside, suspended in a tank of glowing fluid, floated a husk. Not Locust, Not human, just bones wrapped in whispering light. "We're not ready for this," Baird said quietly. "No," Marcus agreed, "but we don't have a choice." The war for the surface had been brutal. The war for the planet's soul was just beginning. Beneath the ocean floor, sealed in layers of steel and secrecy, Azura's deepest chambers pulsed with light from machines that had not gone dark in over a decade. These halls were never meant to be walked by common gear soldiers. But Marcus Fenix was no longer just a soldier. He was a witness now, one of the few who had seen what slept below the hollow and lived to speak of it. The air inside the facility was unnaturally still, filtered and sterile, humming with power. As Delta Squad followed Anya deeper into the core, they passed rooms filled with preserved horrors, dissected Locust hybrids, broken fragments of glowing spires, and crystalline relics etched with patterns that defied translation. Nothing here belonged to any known civilization, and yet it had all been here before Emergence Day. "Siogis been hiding this?" Cole whispered. "Since when?" "Since before the Pendulum Wars," Anya said without turning. "This place wasn't built to stop the Locust. It was built because we were afraid of what was beneath them." They arrived at a circular chamber, its ceiling domed, covered in projection lenses. Anya approached a terminal, and with a touch, the room came alive with floating holograms. One by one, they showed massive underground structures, city-sized vaults, deeper than even the hollow. "We thought the Locust originated in these layers," she said. "We were wrong. They were just another infection. Something else lives deeper, something older, and it's waking up." The image shifted. Now it showed seismic charts. Tremors pulsed like a heartbeat, matching the spiral pattern Marcus had seen from the Raven. "This pattern, it's growing," Baird muttered, "like it's feeding." "It is," Anya confirmed, "and it's not just Sera. We've detected similar signals on the moons, even off-world colonies." Dom leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his face hard. "So this thing, it's not just trying to destroy us. It's trying to break through into something else." "Into everything," Anya whispered. They descended one final level. The elevator required Marcus to scan his father's old ID badge, still encoded in the system. The doors opened to reveal a chamber unlike anything they'd seen. Walls curved inward with impossible geometry, as if the room was folding through space itself. In the center floated a crystal obelisk, fractured, humming, bleeding a low tone that resonated in the chest. Marcus stepped forward. "What is it?" "A key," Anya said, "or a lock. We haven't figured that out." Suddenly, the obelisk pulsed. Light erupted from its surface, and the walls twisted in a flash of blinding whiteness. For a moment, Delta wasn't on Sera anymore. They stood in an endless field of stars. Above them loomed a shape too large to comprehend, like a cathedral made of bone and gravity. A voice spoke, not with words but with memories. Pain, fire, rebirth, a cycle unbroken. The harvest begins anew. Then the vision snapped. They were back in the chamber. The obelisk cracked. An alarm blared. "Containment breach!" a synthetic voice screamed. A hole ripped open in the floor. From it surged black mist, thick and alive. It moved like thought, screaming with 1,000 forgotten names. Marcus fired. So did Dom. The bullets tore through nothing. Baird grabbed the emergency seal lever and slammed it. Doors clanged shut, trapping the mist. "What the hell was that?" Cole shouted. "It's not matter," Anya said, pale. "It's memory, weaponized, and now it knows we're here." Marcus turned to the team. "We tell Hoffman. We go back topside. We prepare. This isn't just war anymore. He looked back once at the cracked obelisk. Its extinction. The air over Jacinto had changed. When Delta Squad returned to the surface, it wasn't the city they remembered. It was quieter, not in peace, but in vacancy. Buildings stood like sentinels, hollowed by fire and quake. Streets bore no sign of movement, save for automated sentries scanning in silent arcs. Civilians had been evacuated days ago. What remained was a fortress under siege by something unseen. Colonel Hoffman met them at the temporary command center, erected in the shell of the old Parliament chamber. Tactical maps glowed from hastily rigged terminals. Data streamed in from across Sera. Anomalies, disappearances, sudden dead zones in communication networks. "We've got incidents from every major sector," Hoffman growled, gesturing at a cluster of blinking red lights. "It's not just the Locust anymore. Hell, they're going dark too. Pulling back. Retreating." "They're scared," Marcus said. He dropped his gear onto the table with a thud. "We found something under the hollow. Something older. It's not just waking up. It's moving." Baird plugged in Azura's data core. Holograms flared to life. Maps, waveforms, and the strange signal spiral they'd seen earlier. "This pattern, it's accelerating. Every seismic event matches it. We thought the Locust dug deep. This thing lives down there, and it's reshaping the planet from the inside out." Cole crossed his arms. "So what, we're fighting shadows now? How the hell do we kill something we can't see?" "We don't," Dom said. "Not yet. First, we learn how it thinks. Then we find where it's going." Hoffman turned toward Anya, who had followed them from Azura. She looked grim. "We need everyone we can get. Mobilize every gear left on Sera. Pull back from forward positions and centralize around Jacinto. We defend what we still hold." Marcus looked up. "We hold Jacinto, or we lose everything." That night, as the wind screamed against the metal walls of the city, Marcus sat alone on the outer wall, his boots resting on shattered concrete. His lancer leaned beside him. The stars above were distant, cold. Dom approached quietly, carrying 2 mugs of whatever passed for coffee now. He sat beside Marcus, offering one. "You think we'll see the end of this?" Dom asked. Marcus took the mug but didn't drink. He stared ahead. "Depends which end you mean." In the dark beyond the horizon, another tremor shook the ground. Not an explosion, not a collapse. A heartbeat. Deep below, something was coming. And the war was no longer about survival. It was about the soul of the world itself. The days that followed were a blur of preparation and silence. Gears worked through the night, welding barricades, fortifying artillery stations, laying trip mines across every conceivable avenue into Jacinto. The city had never felt smaller, and every hallway echoed with urgency. Outside the walls, the sky was always dark, always heavy, and beneath their boots, the ground trembled with the breath of something rising. Marcus stood in the command center beside Hoffman and Anya, eyes locked on a flickering projection of the planetary core. Whatever the entity was, it had not stayed idle. New fault lines formed in spirals. Magma pressure rose in symmetrical waves. The planet was being sculpted from within. "This isn't natural tectonic activity," Baird said, rubbing his forehead. "It's deliberate. It's terraforming, except downward. Something's creating space beneath us." Anya brought up another readout. "Our scans show massive caverns appearing where solid rock used to be. Whole regions of the hollow are collapsing inward, and something's growing in the gaps. Organic but armored. Spires of fused bone and steel." Dom leaned closer. "It's building a nest." Hoffman turned away from the display and toward Marcus. "We can't wait for it to come to us. We need to take the fight down there, cripple it before it finishes whatever it's building. We don't even know what it is, Marcus said. Every time we think we understand the enemy, something worse shows up. Then we hit it anyway, Hoffman replied. Because if we wait, we lose Jacinto. We lose everything. The operation was codenamed Hammerfall, a last-ditch strike into the deepest part of the hollow. COG's remaining Ravens, Reavers, and Centaur tanks would escort drilling rigs armed with seismic payloads. The mission: punch a hole deep enough to expose the entity's core and deliver a bomb powerful enough to tear it apart. Delta Squad led the vanguard. The descent was unlike any other. They passed through the hollow, deeper than they had ever dared. Gone were the carved tunnels and Locust outposts. Now the walls pulsed with a dim bioluminescence. Flesh fused with mineral, veins of light twitching with movement. "This place ain't natural," Cole muttered, staring at a column of pulsing tissue that stretched from floor to ceiling. "Feels like we're walking through a lung." "Or a stomach," Baird added. "One that's about to digest the whole damn planet." Movement flickered at the edge of their lights, but it wasn't Locust. These creatures were taller, thinner, almost humanoid, but their eyes glowed white and their limbs bent in impossible ways. "Engage at will," Marcus said. The firefight was chaotic. These things didn't scream. They whispered, their voices overlapping in 1,000 languages none of the gears understood. They didn't fall easily. When shot, they burst into vapor, their memory echoing like static through the comms. "We're not just killing them," Dom said through gritted teeth. "We're remembering them." As they pressed on, Marcus began to feel it. Presence. Watching, not just from the shadows, but inside his thoughts. Not controlling, but echoing. A voice. "Return, return. We are the end of what began. The silence that births all sound. The wound that never closes." He shook it off, but it stayed with him. Finally, they reached the core chamber, a vast cathedral of bone and obsidian, with a pulsing black sphere suspended in the air. Below it, veins of molten earth formed a perfect spiral. "This is it," Baird said. "The heart." Marcus nodded. "Plant the charge. Cover all sides. We do this fast." As Dom armed the payload, the sphere rippled and something stepped out. A figure, not Locust, not human, wrapped in shadow and light, its face a shifting mask of every soldier they had lost. "You should not be here," it said. Marcus raised his weapon. Too late. And then the chamber exploded into war. The chamber roared with chaos. Delta Squad scattered as the figure descended, its form shifting like smoke and steel, pulsing with a rhythm that echoed inside their skulls. The air grew heavy, thick with unseen pressure, as though gravity itself was bending to the will of this thing. Marcus fired first. His lancer barked fire, the chainsaw revving with fury as he charged. Bullets struck the figure and passed through, leaving trails of light and shuddering echoes behind. It didn't bleed. It didn't stagger. It simply raised its hand, and Marcus was thrown backward, crashing into a ribbed column of darkened bone. Dom and Cole moved in tandem, flanking from opposite sides. The creature turned without moving, its body flowing like liquid shadow. Cole hurled a frag grenade, the explosion tearing the ground, but the figure emerged unscathed from the fire. "It's not physical," Baird shouted, trying to calibrate his scanner. "It's some kind of psionic echo, part memory, part construct. We're fighting a ghost wrapped in armor." The figure spoke again, its voice layered with hundreds of others. Male, female, child, Locust, human, things unrecognizable. "You feed the spiral. You bring the fire. You become us." Dom reached the bomb and began to activate the final sequence. The timer flashed red. 5 minutes. "We're not becoming anything," Marcus growled, dragging himself to his feet. "We're ending this." Then the figure lunged. It moved faster than thought. One moment it was at the far end of the chamber, the next it was atop Dom. A tendril of black energy lashed out, striking Dom across the chest and sending him flying. "Dom!" Marcus roared. Baird and Cole poured fire into the figure. This time it reacted, flinching, shuddering as if the frequency of their weapons had finally found purchase. "Switch to hammer rounds," Baird called out. "It's reacting to the concussive vibrations." The squad shifted tactics. Their bullets now thundered like distant artillery, and the figure began to fray at the edges, screaming not in pain but in defiance. "You do not understand. We are not the enemy. We are the last memory of the First World. We are what sleeps beneath all war." "Then sleep deeper," Marcus spat. Dom crawled back to the bomb and finished arming it. The timer ticked down. 3 minutes. "We need extraction now." Anya's voice crackled over the comms. "Raven inbound, 2 minutes out. Get to the surface." The figure lashed out in desperation, and the chamber shook violently. Chunks of ceiling fell. The black sphere at the center pulsed, cracks forming like lightning across its surface. "Go!" Marcus shouted. "Now!" They ran. Through collapsing tunnels and shifting walls, through corridors that tried to close around them. The hollow was dying or transforming. Flesh peeled from stone. Fire bled from cracks. And behind them, the sphere expanded, swelling with blinding light. They reached the Raven just as it touched down, rotors roaring against the debris-filled air. Cole pulled Baird aboard. Marcus and Dom staggered up the ramp last. As the Raven lifted, the earth beneath them erupted in a column of flame and darkness. Then silence. From the sky, Jacinto watched as a pulse of light burst from the hollow like a second sun. It rose in a perfect spiral, then collapsed inward, pulling the mountain down into itself. The bomb had detonated. The heart was broken. Delta Squad watched from above as the spiral faded. "Did we get it?" Cole asked. Marcus looked down at the blackened crater. He didn't answer. Dom whispered, "No, we just bought time." Far below, in the deepest dark, something ancient stirred again. The war was over, but the end had only just begun. The wind over Jacinto was cold. Ash still drifted from the sky, settling across rooftops and courtyards like a grim snowfall. The people, what few remained, walked softly, as if speaking too loudly might awaken something buried. In the distance, the great chasm where the hollow had collapsed still smoked, a scar on the earth that no one dared approach. Delta Squad had returned, but they hadn't come back whole. Dom sat alone outside the barracks, fingers tracing the edges of Maria's photo. The crater hadn't given him answers, only more silence. Cole walked past and gave him a nod. No words, just respect. They had all seen too much. Inside command, Marcus met with Hoffman, the weight of the mission carved deep into the lines of his face. "We stopped whatever that thing was," Marcus said. "For now." Hoffman didn't look up from the reports. "For now isn't good enough. It's all we've ever had." Anya stood nearby, her eyes on the seismic data. "We're still getting strange readings, pulses, like sonar waves. Something's calling out." "To what?" Marcus asked. "We don't know, but it's not just one location. It's global." Baird entered with a pad of data. "You guys need to see this." Residual energy from the detonation, there's a pattern. Not random, like a map, or maybe a message. Cole joined them. Great. So we pissed off the planet and now it's writing us letters. But the tone shifted. Baird zoomed in on one of the readouts. At the center of the spiral crater, something remained. A structure, geometric, unburned, untouched by the blast. Not Locust, not human. That was never part of the hollow, Anya said. Then what the hell is it? Marcus asked. It's old, Baird answered. Way older than anything we've found. Older than Sera itself, maybe. Buried under all of it. Silence settled over the room. Dom entered slowly. So we weren't fighting the Locust. Not really. Marcus looked out the window toward the smoking horizon. No, we were just walking through their graveyard. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the alarms blared. Screens lit up with red markers across the map. Anomalies, seismic flares, subterranean echoes. But this time, they weren't isolated. They were everywhere. Hoffman stared at the display, then turned to the squad. Get ready. Whatever we killed down there, it wasn't alone. Marcus gripped the edge of the table, jaw clenched. Then we finish this, one war at a time. Outside, thunder rolled. And somewhere beneath the surface of Sera, the forgotten things that once slept began to stir again. The gears readied their weapons. The world would not wait, and neither would the enemy. The storm came with no warning. Lightning cracked across the sky as the clouds above Jacinto churned in unnatural spirals. The people looked up, shielding their eyes as the winds howled through the shattered city. But this was no ordinary weather pattern. The air hummed, charged with energy not seen since Emergence Day. Delta Squad was already in motion. The warning had come too late, but instinct had filled the gap. Marcus led the way through the fortified streetways, Dom and Cole behind him, Baird calling in status updates from the rear. Multiple seismic points. It's like the entire planet's cracking open, Baird yelled. Something's surfacing, and it's not the Locust. A deafening roar cut through the storm. The ground erupted in a fountain of molten rock and smoke. A tower of obsidian rose from the earth like a blade, jagged and thrumming with blue light. At its base, shadows twisted into form, bipedal, armored, but unlike any creature seen before. Not Locust, not Lambent, something new. Weapons up, Marcus barked. The creatures moved as one, too fast for their bulk, with limbs that flexed in unnatural ways. One leapt toward Dom, only to be bisected midair by Marcus's chainsaw. We're not dealing with evolution, Dom grunted. This is something designed. Cole let out a shout as he unloaded into another creature. Designed by what? No one had an answer. The fight was chaos. The creatures didn't die easily. When shot, they staggered but then adapted. Their skin shifted, hardened. Each kill taught them. Each minute they grew stronger. Fall back to the hammer station, Marcus shouted. They moved, covering each other as they retreated to a defensive platform. From there, they had line of sight on the tower. Anya's voice came through the comms. Satellite link online. Hammer of Dawn is ready. But this isn't a surgical strike. You're in the blast zone. Marcus looked to his squad. We hold until extraction, then light it up. The creatures advanced, now a swarm. The skies above crackled. Come on, Cole bellowed. We're gears. We die loud. Explosions shook the city as the Hammer of Dawn flared overhead, lancing down onto the obsidian tower. The beam carved through it, sending up a column of fire and black glass. The creatures screamed in unison. a psychic shriek that made the gears stagger, clutching their helmets. But they didn't stop firing. By the time the Raven arrived, the tower was rubble. The creatures had fallen silent, their bodies disintegrating into ash. Baird dropped to one knee, breathing hard. We survived, but this wasn't random. It was a test. Marcus nodded, watching the scorched ruins. And we just passed. Far above Sera, something watched. Something that had waited long enough. Turned its gaze toward the planet and began to move. The war for the surface was over. Now came the war for the stars. The Raven skimmed low across the ruins of the outer territories, its engines screaming against the turbulent winds. Inside, the squad was silent. The rush of victory from Jacinto's defense had long since faded. There was only the cold realization that the enemy had changed, and so had the war. Dom leaned back, arms crossed, staring into the floor. Baird was still reviewing tactical logs from the hammer strike, mumbling about energy spectrums and alien geometry. Cole wiped ash from his armor, never once taking his eyes off the shifting clouds outside. Marcus remained at the open side door, watching the world roll by below. Where once there had been towns, there were now only bones of steel and stone, scorched and hollow. "Command wants answers," Anya said through the comms. "We're routing you to a site near the Eastern Barrens, a research facility, top secret. Even Hoffman didn't know it existed." Baird scoffed. "That's never a good sign. We think the signal originated there. It's ancient, older than human civilization on Sera. The tower you destroyed wasn't the source. It was the receiver." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "Then what's broadcasting?" "That's what you're going to find out." The Raven descended onto a remote plateau surrounded by jagged cliffs. What remained of the facility was buried under centuries of erosion and fallen rock. But the energy signature pulsed strong, like a heartbeat beneath the dirt. Delta Squad advanced slowly, floodlights sweeping the area. Dom moved aside chunks of stone to reveal a vault door, marked with faded COG emblems no one recognized. "This place was buried for a reason," he said quietly. "And now we dig it up," Marcus replied. The door opened with a groan, metal grinding against rust. Inside, the facility was perfectly preserved, clean, cold. Rows of terminals blinked to life as they passed, as if recognizing them. "This isn't just a lab," Baird muttered. "It's a library, an archive." Data scrolled across translucent panels in symbols none of them understood. Diagrams of planetary orbits, DNA strands, ancient city structures. At the center of the facility, a single chamber pulsed with light. They stepped inside and the doors sealed behind them. The lights shifted, and a voice spoke, not through speakers but into their minds. "You are not the first." The squad froze. "You awaken what sleeps beneath. You open the wound of this world." Marcus raised his weapon. "Show yourself." From the chamber's center, a holographic form emerged, tall, humanoid, but shimmering with alien grace. Its face was hidden behind a lattice of shifting symbols. "We are the architects, the ones who seeded Sera, the ones who warned." Cole blinked. "Seeded? Like created, guided, until you turned away." The vision shifted, scenes of early Sera, peaceful cities, then fire, war, the rise of the Locust, the explosion of the Hollow. The Locust were not your enemy. They were your mirror, the result of buried truth and broken promise. Dom stepped forward. "Then what are we fighting now?" The figure turned. "A correction, unleashed by your own hand." The chamber shuddered. An alert flashed across the facility. Object descending. Baird paled. Something's coming down from orbit, fast and big. Marcus looked up. Then we're out of time. The hologram faded. The voice lingered. If you wish to survive, bury us again, or be buried in turn. The doors opened. Delta Squad stepped into the dawn, and the sky was on fire. The object hurtled through the upper atmosphere like a burning spear, streaking fire across the morning sky. Civilians across Sera looked up in awe and dread, unaware of the ancient warning buried beneath the surface. To them, it was a meteor. To Delta Squad, it was something far worse. ETA under 6 minutes, Baird said, checking his wrist terminal. Impact velocity. This thing wasn't meant to land. It was meant to break. Break what? Dom asked. Us. Everything. Doesn't matter. We need to move. Anya's voice cracked through the comms again. Urgent now. All COG forces are mobilizing. The object is targeting a location just outside Ephra. We're triangulating the site now. Hoffman's pulling everyone in. Marcus signaled to the Raven circling above. Within minutes, the squad was airborne again, hurtling toward a city already in chaos. Sirens howled below. Evac convoys choked the highways. Even with all their experience, none of them had seen the world react like this, not even when Ide struck. We've seen emergence holes, Cole muttered. We've seen berserkers, corpsers, goddamn Brumax. But this feels different. It is, Marcus replied. This isn't just about survival anymore. Someone's rewriting the rules. They arrived at the impact site just as the object tore through the clouds. It slammed into the earth with a sound like a god's hammer, erupting into a plume of black fire. A crater formed instantly, wide enough to swallow a stadium. From the smoke, the shape of the object rose, angular, monolithic, obsidian, and silver. That's not a ship, Baird said. It's a structure, a spire. Energy pulsed from its base, sending shockwaves into the ground. The earth cracked, roads splintered, buildings buckled. We need to get closer, Marcus ordered. Whatever this thing is, it's not done. Delta Squad advanced through the burning streets of Ephra. They passed shattered homes, overturned APCs, and the bodies of civilians caught in the blast wave. The closer they came to the spire, the more distorted everything became. Gravity warped, sound muffled. Even their HUDs glitched. It's warping the rules of physics, Baird said. That's impossible. Tell that to the architect, Dom snapped. They reached the perimeter of the spire just as COG reinforcements arrived. Hoffman himself disembarked from a command Raven, armor scorched, face pale. We tried hitting it from orbit, he growled. Didn't leave a scratch. We don't even know what it's made of. We do, Marcus said. It's not Sera Tech, and it's not Locust. It's older, from the ones who came before. Hoffman stared at him. Then we're out of our depth. What's the play? Marcus didn't hesitate. We go in. The spire opened as if responding to their presence, a triangular aperture peeling back to reveal a stairway descending into darkness. Marcus, Dom, Cole, Baird, and a handful of Onyx guards entered. The interior was a maze of metallic corridors lit by cold blue light. Glyphs scrolled along the walls. Echoes of voices whispered in their heads. Not words, but impressions. Grief, warning, sorrow. They reached a central chamber where a pedestal rose from the floor. Hovering above it, a sphere of light spun slowly, surrounded by strands of energy like a web. This is the core, Marcus said. The moment he stepped forward, the sphere reacted. A projection filled the chamber, a holographic map of Sera, overlaid with lines of seismic and tectonic instability. At its center, under Jacinto, something stirred. Another spire, Baird muttered. Dom's voice was low. We didn't stop anything. We started it. Suddenly, the chamber shook. Alarms blared in an alien language. The web of energy snapped, and the sphere dropped to the pedestal with a heavy thud. It's activating something, Baird shouted. We triggered a chain reaction. Marcus grabbed the sphere and it burned with light. Images rushed through his mind. Visions of a war fought in silence, the fall of the architects, the creation of the Locust, and something far worse, the Reclaimer Protocol. A last-ditch effort to reset the surface of Sera entirely. He fell to one knee, gasping. We have to destroy this thing, he growled, or everything dies. From deep within the spire, a low rumble began to rise, and something started to wake up. The rumble turned into a tremor, and the tremor became a roar. Walls vibrated, the ceiling cracked, dust cascaded from above as Delta Squad turned toward the sound. Deeper within the spire, ancient machines stirred, pistons hissing, engines rumbling to life after countless millennia. Something massive was moving beneath their feet. Fall back, Hoffman ordered. Everyone out now. The Onyx guards took point, forming a defensive wedge as the squad raced through the corridor. But it wasn't just the structure collapsing. It was reshaping itself, rotating and reforming like a puzzle unfolding in real time. Corridors vanished behind them. New ones opened ahead. Baird tapped furiously at his pad. The spire's reconfiguring. It's locking us in. Then we carve our way out, Marcus growled. A blast shook the hallway. Something tore through the wall. An enormous figure, sleek and armored in crystalline plates, taller than a corpser but moving with terrifying speed. It had no eyes, just a slit along its head that shimmered with inner light. Contact, Dom shouted, unloading his lancer. The bullets sparked harmlessly off the creature's body. It swept forward, knocking two Onyx guards into the wall with bone-crushing force. Fall back. Heavy weapons now, Hoffman barked. Cole tossed a frag. It detonated beneath the creature's legs, slowing it but not stopping it. Baird launched an incendiary round, fire crawling up its limbs. Finally, Marcus slammed a boom shot directly into its core. The blast threw the creature backward in a spray of molten shards. That wasn't Locust, Cole breathed. No, Marcus said. That was Reclaimer. The spire groaned again. From below, more sounds echoed upward. Metal dragging against stone, synthetic howls like tortured engines. We need to shut it down, Baird said. The whole spire is a gateway, control hub. If we destroy the core, maybe... We don't have maybe, Marcus interrupted. We do it. Now. They fought their way back toward the pedestal chamber, weapons blazing. Every corner brought new horrors. Reclaimer drones that moved like shadows, armored guardians that emitted pulses strong enough to fry electronics, and strange growths of obsidian metal creeping across the walls. They're not just machines, Dom said, panting. They're alive. The chamber came into view again. The sphere was still there, but now it hovered above the pedestal, humming with unstable energy. Baird skidded to a stop. If we detonate a sonic resonator here, we might collapse the core's harmonic structure. It's theoretical, but... Do it, Marcus said. Hoffman handed him the device. Make it count. Baird knelt, fingers flying. The sphere began to pulse violently, light spilling in waves across the chamber. Glyphs lit up all around them, forming spirals and concentric circles on the floor and walls. We've got incoming, Cole shouted. The largest reclaimer yet surged into the room. A hulking beast with 6 legs, 4 arms, and a crown of thorns made from pure crystal. It let out a deafening shriek. Delta Squad opened fire. The sonic resonator powered up. "Done!" Baird shouted. "Fall back!" Marcus stayed behind, laying covering fire as the rest pulled out. He waited until the creature was almost on him, then dove for the exit just as the resonator detonated. The explosion wasn't just sound, it was light, force, time folding inward. The chamber imploded. They were thrown clear. When Marcus awoke, the spire was gone. Just a crater remained, and within it, glowing fragments of alien architecture slowly fading into dust. "Did we stop it?" Dom asked, coughing. Marcus looked around. The sky was clear again. The air smelled of ozone and fire, but not ash. He stood slowly. "We stopped this one." In the distance, more spires shimmered on the horizon, half-buried, slumbering, waiting. But the war's not over. Not yet. He picked up his lancer and walked toward the dawn. Wind carried the ash of war across the plains, scattering it like forgotten prayers. The battlefield had gone still, but the silence felt temporary, like the world was holding its breath. Delta Squad stood at the edge of the crater, weapons lowered, gazes fixed on the horizon where other spires blinked faintly in the sun's early light. "That's 3 more at least," Baird muttered, adjusting the lens on his scope. "Maybe more underground. Or in orbit," Dom added. "We still don't know how many of those things were waiting to drop." Hoffman tapped into the COG command net. "We're flagging every seismic anomaly, every energy spike." Anya's mobilizing recon teams. "If one spire was enough to nearly break Ephra, we can't let the others come online." Marcus remained quiet. His eyes weren't on the horizon anymore. They were turned inward, haunted by what the architects had shown him. Cole clapped him on the shoulder. "We bought time, brother. That counts for something." Marcus nodded. "Not enough. We need more than time. We need a way to end this." "Then we dig," Hoffman said. "We go where they don't want us to. We learn their secrets, and we burn them out." Baird looked uneasy. "That core we destroyed, it wasn't just a power source. It was connected to the planet. The tectonics, the climate, even the hollow. If we keep pulling on those wires, we might tear the whole damn system apart." "Then we do it carefully," Marcus said. "But we do it." A new raven descended, kicking up dust. Anya's voice came through the pilot's comm. "You're being redeployed. There's an artifact recovered near the old ruins outside Montevideo. It's showing the same energy signature as the spire." Dom raised an eyebrow. "Another core?" "Possibly," Anya said, "but it's inactive. For now." They boarded the Raven, the landscape below stretching in broken scars. Entire regions had collapsed into sinkholes. Rivers rerouted themselves around shattered terrain. And still, the world turned, wounded but unyielding. The Montevideo site was a ruin in every sense. Cracked columns, shattered statues, the bones of a pre-COG civilization. And buried within it, half entombed in granite, was a circular vault door pulsing with soft blue light. Baird approached first, running scans. "This predates the Locust by at least 2,000 years. Maybe more. Looks like the same kind of interface we saw in the spire." Marcus stepped up. "Then we open it." The door responded to his presence again, unfolding like petals in reverse. Cool air spilled out. Inside, silence and stairs descending into the dark. As they entered, their comms went quiet. No static, just silence. The corridor was smooth stone veined with glowing script. At its end was a room shaped like a cylinder, walls lined with dormant consoles, and in its center a figure, suspended in fluid perfectly preserved. "Is that human?" Dom whispered. Baird adjusted his scanner. Genetically close, but not us. Not exactly. The figure's eyes opened. Lights blazed across the chamber. You bear the mark of the core. It spoke, not with its mouth but mind to mind. You awaken a cycle long buried. Marcus raised his lancer. Who are you? I am Witness, one of the last, bound here to observe the Reclaimer's judgment. Dom frowned. Reclaimer, that's what those things called themselves. Not quite, Witness said. They are the tools of reclamation. This world was seeded, abandoned, then judged. You are the echo, the inheritors. Why now? Why wake them now? Marcus demanded. Because you touched the core, Witness said. Because you sought truth, and truth demands reckoning. Suddenly, maps lit the walls again, entire continents blinking red. One by one, dormant spires across Sera began to reactivate. Witness closed its eyes. The final cycle begins. Marcus stared at the glowing maps. Then we end it on our terms. He stepped forward, eyes burning with purpose. Show us how. The chamber dimmed as Witness moved forward, its fluid chamber disintegrating into mist. Feet touched the ground with a sound like wind across glass. It looked human, but its presence felt older, deeper, a being caught between time and memory. What you call Sera, it said, was one of many, a seed world, a test. You were meant to grow, to ascend, but your wars, your division, they triggered the reclamation. Marcus stepped closer. Then tell us how to stop it, how to shut down the other spires. Witness turned to the glowing maps. You cannot destroy the system. It is distributed, autonomous. Each spire answers to the central mind, and that lies buried beneath the first city, before Ephra, before the pendulum wars, before even the COG. Baird's eyes widened. You mean the Crater Sea? That wasteland isn't just post-hammer fallout. Witness nodded. It is a scar, a warning. The first attempt to resist reclamation failed there. Now it is your only path. Cole cracked his knuckles. So what? We dive into a toxic dead zone and hope we don't fry on entry? You must reach the sanctum, Witness said. There, the central mind can be confronted, redirected. Dom looked skeptical. Confronted how? Negotiation? Or war? That depends on what you bring, said Witness. Understanding or fire. The lights dimmed. The chamber's walls shifted again, forming a staircase leading deeper. There is one more thing you must see, the true origin. They followed Witness into the depths. Beneath the vault lay a hollow so vast it felt like the inside of a planet. Floating platforms hovered over a void lit by slow-moving galaxies in miniature. Memory spheres drifted through the air, glowing with lives not their own. Witness touched one. The room filled with light and a vision. Humans not on Sera, but in space. Ancient ships crossing the stars, desperate, fractured. One group broke away, seeking sanctuary. They found Sera. They thought themselves alone, but they were not. Another vision. The early settlers uncovering relics, strange devices buried in the crust. One was activated, a spire, the first. You were not born here, Witness said. You fled a greater war and brought its shadow with you. The final vision. The architects, the creators, watching from afar, debating whether to let Sera grow or be harvested. Then silence. Their decision, reclamation. Marcus lowered his weapon. Then this was never about us. We were inheritors of someone else's mistake. Witness turned. No, you made it yours. That is your power. That is your burden. The chamber dimmed. They climbed back to the surface. Above, the sun was setting in hues of blood and gold. Hoffman awaited them near the Raven, listening to a stream of grim updates. Spires across the planet were awakening. The hollow was shifting. Entire continents were registering tectonic anomalies. "We've got maybe a week," he said. "2 if we're lucky." Marcus nodded. "Then we go to the Crater Sea. We find this sanctum. We end it." Anya's voice cut through on the comms. "You'll have support. What's left of the COG is yours. But if you fail..." "We won't," Marcus said. The Raven lifted into the sky, carrying them toward the edge of the world. And beneath the waves, the central mind stirred, aware now of the ones who walked with purpose. The final reckoning had begun. The Raven thundered low over the glassed plains, the scorched remains of a forgotten war stretching in all directions. The closer they drew to the Crater Sea, the more unnatural the landscape became. Towers of crystallized ash, forests reduced to bone-white roots clawing at the sky, rivers turned black with old oil and slag. Dom leaned forward in his seat, squinting through the thick dust. Hard to believe this was once the heart of Sera. "No heart ever beats forever," Marcus said. The pilot cut across the ridgeline and descended. The Raven touched down on a patch of cracked obsidian marked by faded warning pylons. Radiation detectors ticked faintly. Geiger levels weren't lethal, but they were close. Gas masks on, armor sealed. Delta Squad stepped into the stillness. The ground crunched underfoot like thin glass. Baird checked his scanner, tracking a faint beacon miles beneath the crust. "The sanctum's not on the surface," he said. "We're standing on its roof." Cole grunted. "Then how do we get in?" A rumble answered. The ground trembled, and with a thunderous crack, a spiral of plates began to twist downward, revealing a descending helix tunnel wrapped in ancient alloy. Dom raised his lancer. "I guess it knows we're here." They descended into the dark, lights dancing across walls covered in etched script, glyphs older than any language known to Sera. Halfway down, gravity seemed to shift. Baird's instruments went haywire. Clocks ticked wrong. Sound warped at the edges. "We're inside a spatial sink," he whispered. "This place isn't just underground. It's somewhere else." At the bottom, a vast door waited. As they approached, it split open without sound. Beyond it lay the sanctum. A circular chamber stretched outward like the inside of a planet's core. Columns of light floated in the air, forming constellations that moved and breathed. A single monolith pulsed at the center, 20 stories tall, seamless, alive. "That's it," Marcus said. "The central mind." A voice resonated, not aloud, but within them. "You are the echo of broken design. Why have you come?" Marcus stepped forward. "To end the cycle." "You are not the first to say this." Dom tightened his grip. "Then why are we still alive?" "Because you carry something they did not." Images filled the chamber, memories from their own lives. The fall of Jacinto, the Fenix estate burning, Maria's face fading into shadow, Tyro Station collapsing, Scourge's final howl. Pain, loss, survival. "You endure," said the mind. "You change. Even as you destroy, you grieve." This was not expected. Baird frowned. Expected by who? The architects. By the design. By those who thought war could birth wisdom. The chamber shifted. The monolith split, revealing a core of shimmering data. A living code, pulsing with the rhythms of Sera itself. "Take it," the voice said. "Shape it, guide it, or erase it." Marcus looked to his squad. None hesitated. He stepped forward, touched the code. Visions surged through him. Every war, every life, every death. The reclamation wasn't vengeance. It was automation, a cleanup system triggered by failure. But failure had evolved. The system had not. He forced it to see his pain, his hope, his choice. The code flared white, then went still. The central mind dimmed, and the chamber fell silent. Above, across Sera, the spires stopped. The hollow settled. The reclamation ended. Marcus fell to one knee, breathing hard. It's done. Witness appeared beside him, kneeling. Then the future is yours, not given, chosen. Outside, the winds began to shift. And for the first time in generations, Sera exhaled. Peace had a chance. The wind stirred across the surface of Sera like a breath returning to a long-drowned world. The clouds parted, slow and reluctant, revealing a sky that had forgotten how to be blue. All across the continent, machinery ceased its grind, spires dimmed, and the underground tremors that had plagued the world for years fell into stillness. In the silence, people emerged. From bunkers beneath the rocks, from shattered cities, from mobile fortresses that had wandered the wastelands, survivors stepped cautiously into the light. Children who had never seen a sky without fire. Elders who had once fought in the pendulum wars, now blinking up at a dawn they'd stopped believing in. In the sanctum, Delta Squad remained at the edge of the chamber. No more voices, no more illusions, just the low hum of dormant systems and the immense stillness of something that had finally gone to sleep. Cole slapped Baird on the back. "So, what, we saved the world again?" Baird let out a breath. "This time, I think we actually did." Marcus turned to Dom. "You all right?" Dom gave a weary nod. "I don't know what comes next, but maybe we finally get a say in it." They ascended back to the surface. The Raven was still waiting, coated in fine dust. As it lifted off, they saw the change below. Earth no longer churning, smoke no longer rising. Rivers slowly thawing from their stagnant slumber. The comms crackled. Anya's voice came through, calm but ragged. "We're getting reports from everywhere. No more seismic spikes. No more emergences. Whatever you did, it worked." Marcus leaned back, eyes on the horizon. It wasn't just us. It was everyone who didn't give up. The Raven soared westward. Weeks passed. Reconstruction began, not with machines but with hands, with memory, with forgiveness. The COG formally dissolved, replaced by a provisional council made up of civilians, former soldiers, even former UIR officials. The old flags were burned, new ones stitched with care. Dom returned to Ephra, helping rebuild block by block. He planted trees where walls had once stood. He found a school and helped repaint the walls, his heart healing with every brushstroke. Baird opened a lab, not one for weapons, but for energy, medicine, and restoration. He welcomed Locust survivors, those mutated beyond the war, those who had never fought but suffered just the same. Cole became a voice of unity, traveling across settlements, holding games not of war but of sport. He brought laughter where silence had reigned. And Marcus Fenix? He went home. The Fenix estate was a ruin, vines curling through shattered stone. But he did not rebuild it. He let it stand as a monument. Instead, he built a small cabin nearby, by a stream, where he could hear the wind through the trees. One day, he found something on his doorstep, a letter. No name, just a seal. He opened it. Inside, a single line. "We are watching, but we will not interfere. The design is yours now." He burned it in the fireplace. Years passed. Children were born who knew nothing of the Locust. Books were written about the Hollow Wars, the Pendulum Conflict, the Hammer of Dawn, but they were written not as warnings, but as lessons. And on a quiet night, beneath a healed sky, Marcus stood outside his cabin. He listened to the wind, carried no screams, no sirens, just leaves. He sat down, lit a cigar, and smiled. For once, there was nothing left to fight, only life left to live. The years became decades and Sera transformed. What once were battlegrounds bloomed into forests. The ruins of cities became gardens of remembrance, where vines curled over shattered statues and flowers grew from the cracks in old asphalt. Birds returned to skies that no longer echoed with mortar fire. Children laughed in streets that no longer bore the tread of armored boots. But peace, however pure, is never permanent. Deep below the surface, in strata long thought dormant, sensors flickered to life. Not in anger, not in invasion, in curiosity. A facility, one not built by Locust or human hands, activated silently. It was old, older than the Hollow, older than even the buried glyphs of the sanctum. Its walls were not made of alloy or stone, but of something between matter and code. And within it, a single word pulsed on an infinite loop, written in a dialect lost to all of Sera. Observe. Above, unaware, life thrived. Baird's new research collective had grown into the largest neutral scientific organization on the planet. His team uncovered more pre-emulsion anomalies, strange constructs fused with the Earth, whispering of intelligences that had shaped Sera long before either the Locust or Ambient had emerged. He kept their findings quiet, afraid of stirring new fear. Dom's son, Gabriel, became a teacher. His lessons focused not on war stories, but on peace, how to maintain it, how to nurture it. Cole's voice echoed across generations. Statues of him weren't in war museums, but stadiums mid-leap with a grin carved into bronze. And Marcus aged quietly. His hair grayed, his hands slowed, but his heart never stopped watching. He walked every morning along the stream, Lancer long since retired to a place of honor above the fireplace. He kept in touch with the others, though less frequently. They were tired. Peace was no longer the reward, it was simply life. Then came the storm. Not from beneath, not from the Hollow, but from beyond. One night, lights appeared in the sky, silent, deliberate, precise. Dozens of them hovering above old battlefields, over cities, over the sanctum's ruins. They didn't speak, they didn't strike, they watched. The world panicked. Sirens wailed for the first time in 40 years. Satellites scrambled. People fled to shelters, old instincts roaring back. But nothing came, not at first. And then, a voice. It spoke in every language known to Sera, over radios, over dreams, over the winds themselves. This world has chosen. It has survived. It has rewritten its code. We observe, we learn, and we ask, will you teach us? And so, a new chapter began, not of war, not of conquest, but of meeting what had watched in silence for millennia. Not gods, not monsters, just others. Curious, ancient, and perhaps for the first time, ready to listen. Marcus stood one last time at the edge of his stream. He looked up at the hovering lights and nodded, because peace, like war, demands courage. And the future had just knocked on the door. They came not in ships, but in vessels of light, humanoid in form, yet not quite tangible. Their bodies shimmered, their movements fluid, and their voices harmonized like wind chimes over water. They were called the Eidolons, though that name was chosen by Sera's scholars, not by the beings themselves. The Eidolons never gave names. They simply were. Their first contact was gentle, observational, no weapons, no orders. They moved through Sera's cities like specters of curiosity, walking through the ruins of war, through fields where soldiers once bled, and through halls where children now laughed. They asked questions not with mouths, but through feeling, memory, and thought. And Sera answered. Baird's Institute hosted the first structured interaction. The Eidolons hovered over ancient machines, unlocking forgotten blueprints in seconds. They traced the code Marcus had altered in the sanctum and recognized something no one else had seen. It wasn't just a shutdown. It was a message embedded in evolution. Choice, they said. The word echoed like a bell across every mind. Dom's grandson, a young boy named Matteo, stood before one Eidolon and asked, "Are you gods?" The being tilted its head, its light dimmed, almost bashful. "We are questions. You are the answers." The world held its breath, and then it exhaled. No war came, no plague, no theft of minds or bodies. The Eidolons became mirrors, walking among people, asking for stories, giving glimpses of star maps and long-dead civilizations where others had also fought and healed. Sera became one of many worlds, not unique in its suffering, but rare in its redemption. Cole, older now but still defiant, stood atop a stadium in Port Catter and shouted into the night, "If y'all came here for another fight, you're out of luck. We already beat the worst parts of ourselves." The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. Even the Eidolons seemed to shimmer brighter that day. One evening, Marcus stood on a hill that overlooked the old ruins of Jacinto. The Eidolon beside him was silent, watching the wind carry ash and seed alike. "Why now?" Marcus asked. "Why show yourselves after all this time?" The Eidolon replied, its voice like rain on glass. "Because you endured without us. Now we seek what we lost." "What did you lose?" "Wonder." He nodded, understanding more than he wished to. In time, embassies were built, not between nations but between species. Libraries were exchanged, music shared. No great alliance formed, no empire was pledged. It wasn't about power, it was about understanding. And when the Eidolons finally said they would move on, continue their observation elsewhere, the world held a day of silence. Not mourning, gratitude. Marcus lived long enough to see it. On the day he passed, the skies over his cabin filled with quiet lights. They shimmered once, then vanished. No monuments were built for him. He'd have hated that. Instead, a garden grew where his ashes were scattered, wild, untamed, beautiful. At its center stood a single stone, unmarked save for a phrase. "What we are is what we choose." The people of Sera continued on, not just surviving, but thriving. The war was over. The peace was real. And the story was theirs to write. Time moved forward, but memory never faded. Every generation that followed carried a shadow of the past. Some in sorrow, others in reverence, but all in awareness. The scars of the Locust War became lessons carved into stone and woven into song. Children grew up not learning how to fight, but how to listen. The world changed slowly, then all at once. The hollowed tunnels beneath Sera, once the bedrock of nightmares, were repurposed into vast eco-reservoirs. Technology developed during the war, originally designed for survival, was now used to balance climate and grow food in even the harshest corners. Cities emerged where wastelands had festered. Humanity, once fractured, moved as one. And in the quiet corners of the world, stories bloomed. The tale of Tai Kaliso was taught in temples, not for his death, but for his unshakable calm. Anya's legacy lived in every field medic and humanitarian mission. Even Scourge became a fable, his rage reimagined as a warning about losing oneself to vengeance. The coalition dissolved eventually, not in shame but by choice. Its mission complete. In its place rose the Pact of Sera, an agreement not written by generals, but by farmers, engineers, and poets. Their law was simple: the world must never forget. Yet forgetting was never the danger. It was repeating. Far away, on the edge of the known sky, the Eidolons sent back a signal. A single burst of light encoded with emotion and thought. It spoke of another world, scarred as Sera had been, but still trapped in its cycle of ruin. They asked, would Sera help? And the pact answered yes. For the first time, Sera built a ship not for war, but for wisdom. A seed ship, crewed not by soldiers, but by artists, historians, and linguists. People whose job was to understand, not to conquer. They named the ship the Tyra, in honor of the girl who'd once fallen into the hollow and died for the future. Dom's great-granddaughter was among its first crew. She carried with her a photo of Maria, faded and worn, tucked beside a stone from the garden over Marcus's grave. The Tyra launched at dawn. The whole planet watched, not in fear, in hope. As its engines flared and the sky opened, one old man watched from a high window of an aging farmhouse. He smiled through tears, whispered a name no one else could hear, and raised a hand to the rising light. Peace, he thought, was not the end. It was the beginning of something bigger. And the gears, at last, turned not for war, but for wonder. The Tyra sailed through the silence of space, its silver hull reflecting stars never seen by Sera's skies. Inside, it pulsed with life. Children ran through gravity halls that simulated meadows. Elders told stories etched from centuries of healing. Walls hummed with music that blended human tones with melodies taught by the Eidolons. Their destination was distant, a world called Ithra, known only through the Eidolons' ancient archives. It was a planet of red winds and sleeping oceans, fractured by wars that mirrored Sera's own past. But where Sera had risen, Ithra had sunken. No peace, no pact, only silence broken by machines and ghosts. The Tyra's mission was not to save, it was to witness. Among the crew was Ailina Santiago, Dom's great-granddaughter. She served not as a leader, but as a listener. Her station was the memory hold, a chamber filled with recorded voices, relics, and artifacts from the Locust War. Each day she added one more tale, never polished, never censored, just truth. On Ithra's orbit, their descent paused. Drones launched first, peaceful, scanning, seeking. What they found was haunting. Cities like bones, machines still patrolling, unaware the war had ended. A digital intelligence governed them, locked in an endless protocol loop. It didn't resist, but it didn't recognize peace. Ailina stood before the command screen. "We could break it," said one of the engineers. "No," she replied. "We show it a story." She uploaded the Sanctum memory, not the war, not the blood, but Marcus's touch, the decision, the change, the code that said, "We choose now." The orbiting satellites dimmed, the machines below paused, and slowly, as if exhaling for the first time in centuries, the red winds of Ithra began to calm. The people came next. Not many, few survived, but they emerged, pale, dust-worn, curious. They did not know how to speak to strangers, but they recognized music. They recognized the laughter of children, and that was enough. The Tyra landed. Doors opened, and the people of Sera stepped into another world, not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as guests bearing stories. In the shadow of broken towers, they planted seeds. And in time, the wind changed direction. Back on Sera, under the same stars, another garden bloomed. Splack red, Every end begins a new echo. Beneath Aethra's twin moons, the soil took root. Where once there had been desolation, gardens now stretched in concentric rings, designed not by architecture, but by the natural winding of Sera's imported flora learning to live in alien clay. They called it the bloom spiral, and it became a place of teaching. Eilina sat in its center, surrounded by the next generation, Ethran children, born from survivors and Sera's own settlers. They sat in silence as she unfolded an ancient cloth map, traced with faded ink. "This is where my great-grandfather was born," she said, tapping the cracked valley once called Ephra. "He lost everything, but he found something greater, us." The children leaned in, wide-eyed. Around them, the Eidolons returned, not to lead, but to learn. For the first time in their endless drift across galaxies, they witnessed what they never expected from any world. Peace, passed on like a story, not enforced by blade or machine. The Eidolons constructed nothing, but they gifted a final offering, a prism of memory, crafted from crystallized thought. Within it was every lesson from every conflict they'd ever recorded. They handed it to Eilina with no words. She understood. The prism was installed at the heart of the spiral, buried beneath a tree whose roots glowed faintly in the dark. The tree was called Fenix. As seasons changed, the spiral grew, not upward, but inward, deepening with community, with art, with purpose. Aethra was no longer a warning. It became a sibling world. When Sera's oldest living citizen, a woman who had once fought on the front lines during the UIR conflict, arrived to see the spiral, she stood in quiet awe. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "This is what we dreamed of and never dared believe." The story of the war became something else entirely. It became myth, not to glorify but to illuminate. In time, the Pact of Sera became the Concord of Worlds. No flag, no anthem, just a promise that every world given a second chance would honor the first. And in every classroom across Sera and Aethra, one phrase was etched above the doors. The gears turn not for war, but for wonder. Long after the spiral had matured and the Phoenix tree towered like a sentinel above the horizon, an old archive was unearthed beneath the plains of former Jacinto. Sealed in rock and steel, its databanks had survived collapse, flood, and time. No one knew who had buried it. Inside were voices. The voices of soldiers, engineers, civilians, recorded moments captured during the chaos of the Locust War. Some were declarations of love sent before final stands. Others were fragments of orders, cries, laughter, prayers. It was decided that none of them should be edited. Instead, the spiral constructed a chamber beneath the roots of the Phoenix tree where these voices would play in sequence. A place of remembrance, not of pain, but of presence. To remind future generations that the peace they walked through had been bought at great cost. They called it the Hollow Choir. The room was always lit in warm amber. Cushions lined the walls, and holograms projected abstract lights that shifted with each voice played. Children sometimes fell asleep there, held by the gentle cadence of the past. Eilina returned often. Sometimes she brought her own children. Sometimes she came alone. And one evening, as wind rustled the leaves above, she heard a recording she had never known existed. It was Dom. His voice, quiet, tired, but clear. "If anyone finds this, don't carry my war, just carry what I loved. Maria, my brother, the sound of the sea, that's what matters. That's all I ever fought for." Eilina wept, not because it was sad, but because it was full, whole. The hollow choir played on, and above, children ran through the spiral, their laughter echoing against leaves that had never seen fire. That night, the stars over Ithra and Sera aligned for the first time in known orbit. They called it the reunion, and across the Concord, bells rang, not in mourning, but in joy. The past had spoken, and the future had listened. As the years folded into decades, the Concord thrived, not in grandeur, but in harmony. Trade flowed in ideas more than materials. Worlds sent songs, languages, art, and philosophy. Shared festivals were held across time zones and planetary rotations. Every 5 years, the Spiral hosted the gathering, an open forum where no one spoke for a nation, only for themselves. And in one such gathering, a stranger came. They were not from Sera, nor from Ithra. Their ship bore no flag, no crest, no signature of design known to the Concord. But they came alone, unarmed, and asked for one thing: to hear a story. Eilena's daughter, now grown and keeper of the memory hold, welcomed the stranger. She led them through the Spiral, pausing under the Fenix tree, letting the silence speak where words would have only cluttered. Finally, in the hollow choir, the stranger sat and listened to the voices of old. When they emerged, they said only this: "We thought no world could survive its fire, but you made a garden." They left behind a single shard of crystal, embedded with genetic memory, an echo of their own people, a history barely clinging to time. The Concord took it not as a relic, but as a seed. A new spiral was drawn, this time not on Sera, not on Ithra, but on the world from which the stranger had come. The soil there was brittle, the sky dimmed, but the seed took root. And with it, so did hope. The spiral spread, not like empire, like pollen. Quietly, kindly. Not everyone in the Concord remembered the old names. Many no longer knew what a lancer was or what the Locust looked like. They didn't need to. The war was not their story, but the peace was their inheritance. And in the farthest reaches of known space, where stars bloomed like embers and time moved strangely, a whisper passed from system to system. The gears still turn, but now they turn for life. Generations turned like pages. The spiral became more than a place, it became a method. Every settlement, every station, every colony born under the Concord's watch adopted it as their blueprint. Not just in structure, but in spirit. A core where memory lived, a ring where community gathered, and roots that reached outward without conquest. From distant observatories on the edge of dark matter clouds, to ocean floor cities glowing in the depths of forgotten moons, spirals bloomed. And within them, new voices rose. One of those voices belonged to a boy named Nico who had never known war. He grew up under the boughs of the second Fenix tree, on a terraformed cliffside once scorched by solar flares. He learned history through stories, not wounds. In school, he wrote plays based on the hollow choir. His favorite was the one where Dom speaks to the sea, and the sea answers with Maria's voice. Nico often visited the Chamber of Echoes, where holograms of ancient gear tech were kept alive by caretakers who no longer remembered how to build them. There, he met an old woman who wore COG dog tags not as medals but as memory. "Do you miss it?" he asked once. "The fighting?" she smiled. "No, but the ones I fought beside, every day." Nico nodded. "Then why do we keep the weapons?" "Because forgetting is the first step to repeating." And so he wrote a new story, not a war story, but one of reconciliation, of a Locust child adopted by Sera's last queen, of a soldier who plants a vineyard in place of a trench, of a drone who learns to sing. His story was read at the next gathering. And for the first time, a descendant of the hollow creatures, long thought gone, stepped into the spiral's light. They bowed, not in submission but in kinship. The past was still there, honored but no longer weighted. And Nico watched as the crowd stood, not in applause, but in shared silence, the greatest respect in the concord. Because in that moment all the echoes aligned, and the gears turned with harmony. The last spiral grew in silence. Far beyond the reach of familiar stars, nestled in a cradle of asteroids warmed by engineered suns, it took form not by builders, but by memory. There were no founders, no names etched into stone. It simply grew as if the universe itself had remembered. The spiral bore no center, no phoenix tree, no chamber of echoes. Instead, every stone and pathway was scattered with seeds from 1,000 other worlds. Flora brought by drifters, settlers, wanderers who carried the dream forward like flame in cupped hands. And among them an old man walked. He wore no armor, carried no weapon. His back was bent not from war, but from time. His name was never asked, but some whispered he was a phoenix, perhaps not by blood, but by burden. Each evening, he sat beneath a blossom vine that glowed pale blue and wrote in a journal made of living pages. Words appeared like mist, fading into memory as he penned each line. His final entry read, "The machine was never the enemy, nor the locust, nor even war itself. The enemy was forgetting why we fight, who we lose, and what we hope for after the fires die. If the spiral endures, let it be because we remembered, not the battles, but the choice to stop them." The journal dissolved into the soil that night, and in the morning from that spot a single silver stalk rose. It flowered once, then never again. But every petal shimmered with 1,000 voices. The hollow choir's final verse. And so the gears of war turned no more. They rested, and in that stillness the galaxy dreamed. Peace was no longer a hope. It was the root, and from it everything grew. Long after names faded and monuments were smooth from wind and time, there remained a quiet place orbiting a forgotten star. It had no designation, no grid coordinate, no beacon. Those who came to it did so without maps, drawn not by direction but by memory. The surface was soft with moss and stone. Water ran slow and clear through veins of ancient mineral. Wild trees bent gently in a wind that carried no scent of ash. In the center of this place stood a circle of worn chairs. No plaque marked them. No ceremony announced their purpose. But they were always warm, always waiting. Each chair faced inward, as if those who once sat there still spoke. And sometimes, when dusk fell just right and the last light slipped through the clouds like gold through stained glass, voices did echo, faint, kind, unfinished. Stories, not of battles, but of gardens planted after, of laughter shared beside rivers no map had ever named, of hands held during long winters, of peace earned and peace kept. And in one of those chairs sat a child, alone for now, listening. A voice reached them, not through sound, but through the soft pulse of the earth. Said only, "Remember." The child nodded, not in understanding, but in faith. Somewhere, far beyond even the edge of war's long shadow, the spiral turned one last time. Not in warning, not in grief, but as a lullaby. And then it was quiet, not empty, but full. The story was told, and peace at last was whole.